So, but just wanted to welcome everybody here because I'm probably going to be doing a few live streams more than I used to over the last few months because of the whole Corona thing. So I feel like I want people to, be able to access some kind of fun art stuff from home. So I'm actually, going to be doing a gouache painting today out of this coloring book page. It was the fastest thing to set up fast. And if you see anybody in the comments, then just tell me. You can speak and tell me who's there if there's anybody there because I'm looking at this, but...
Amaris, Joseph, and Blue Wren both say hi. You've got 8 people watching.
Yay, hi. Hi to anybody who's showing up today on a Saturday. I assume you're all home like us. So I'm going to be doing a coloring book page from the only coloring book I own right now. I think I've said this to people before. I always end up having a coloring book. So this is the coloring book I have right now. And it has some characters from a fantasy trilogy that we're going to be painting in gouache today. So I've got some leftover gouache paints over here, and I'll be using them. And I'm also going to then probably reach for my art graphs because I told you I wanted to be able to test those and see how they work in comparison to CreateAColor and see how that actually works. But these are the leftover CreateAColors I'll be using first. And I also wanted to tell people a little bit about the fact that we're going to be having some art, Santa Cruz Art League partnered art live streams because my classes for those, the Art League got canceled. And so as a result of that, we are going to be doing some online live streams. So if you want to join in with those, you can. They're going to cost probably a third of what you would pay for a class if you took it live because it is a live. You did as the assignment, and also we're gonna give you an edited version of that video just private for yourself to keep. But I'm also going to be doing some free live streams, and that's just for my own YouTube channel like this one today. So feel free to join in and whatever you can participate in. So this board here that I have was actually for a coloring book. I think it's sold on Dick Blick as a coloring book support. I don't really know how that works because it's just a single page, but it's like this nice plywood piece with these basically slots in it that you can put rubber bands in, and it came with these rubber bands. So I basically am able to do that and put this on top of a drawing board that I already have and then slant that maybe on top of my computer. So this is actually a pretty good idea if you have a single page and you don't want to use a lot of tape constantly. I mean, this is the first time I'm trying it because I just ordered this recently and haven't had a chance to try it. So I'm going to be using that today. The brushes
says Sunday morning here in Australia, so this is breakfast viewing.
Oh, that's nice. For us, it's like afternoon. It's like 2 o'clock over here, but lovely to have anybody here. I hope some of the other people I know that are patrons from Australia that I used to have would also join. People like Kat hopefully will show up, and Diane and Tasha and everybody. I hope I get a few of those people that we know. So the brushes I'll be using today, I already have these out for a miniature that I was painting, so I'm working on some miniatures. In fact, let me show you very quick the brushes I'm using, and then I'll get to the miniatures. So this is a 1/8 of an inch angle brush that I'll be using today. And it's a nice angle brush made out of nylon. And I always like to use these kinds of brushes because, like I said, they're very controllable with the amount of water, and you end up having... so you can go ahead and have some control over the water versus a sable, and also the nice angle or a flat helps you cut into edges and shade and blend better. You can watch my shading and blending brushes video if you want to know what I mean by that. This brush still has a little bit of gouache in it. I should rinse it out. This is a size 0 spotter brush, and I have a wedge brush, which is a number 6, and it's comparable to or 1/2 inch angle, so you can use something like that. I just happen to have this wedge because it's a nice point, but you can use an angle or a round in place of that. I also have a quadruple 0 round, and it's also small enough that you would probably say this is kind of like a 20/0 spotter, because the 20/0 spotter I have is very much similar to that. I also have another spotter in a size 3, and I don't know how much I'm going to use that, but it's basically going to stand in for a round. Again, it doesn't take so much water. Why do I have so many spotters out? Well, when you're using gouache and you don't want to carry as much water with you, especially on a page like this, which is cellulose pulp and not actually watercolor paper, then you want to be able to control your water. Let me go ahead and get a water dropper. Okay, got that from my Tabaret. If you got a chance to watch my supplies video that I just uploaded recently, you'll know that I keep all my supplies in a Tabaret. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this water right into the side here. I'm keeping it at this level so you can see basically what I'm reaching for and getting, but if you need it to be, something different as far as the distance, if you want it to be near, I guess I could try to fix the camera. I think with a live stream there's more limited options to how I can zoom, but there's a, you know, a nice...
Edwin Quintero says hello from Miami.
Edwina, I think.
Oh, Edwina.
Yeah,
Look at
so
you.
hi Edwina, it's nice to have you here, thanks so much. Okay, alright, so we're gonna have those 3 palettes, and I also have some leftover paint on these 2 palettes. This one's a Schminko palette with 12 wells, and this one's my coaster that's made out of porcelain, and it's got some paint on the other side. So let's get going with that. And I do have a reference. I think this is a Court of Thorn and Roses coloring book from a trilogy. I can tell you that this character is named Rhys Feyre, and this one's Feyre. I think this is Morgan. I can't remember the names of... Actually, I probably could and couldn't. I don't know. If you know, if you've read that, you'll probably know. I had it on audiobook and thought it was okay. I don't think it's as good as any of the older trilogies we all read by like Robin McKinley or Juliette Marillier or Patricia McKillop. You know, I don't think anybody is writing that good anymore. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead.
Laurentia Guittiard says hi from Quebec, and Blue Wren says the camera angle is just fine. And
Okay,
you've already
great.
got a thumbs down.
Oh, great. Well, I haven't even started yet, so I guess just my presence is offensive. I told you I had somebody tell me for the supplies tour that that I was deliberately misleading them for some of the supplies that I was showing, like, because I said Phil Martin's Bombay ink instead of PH Martin's Bombay ink, and somebody was so angry with that they told me I was deliberately misleading them. And I was like, I wouldn't have like 250 videos up giving free information with me making no money off of them if I was trying to mislead people, so that's their prerogative. But I just think it's so weird how you get some really nice people online and you also get some really mean people. Okay, so I'm going to try to take this color and mix it down into a lighter color here. And right now I am standing up. I'll probably sit down in a little bit, but the angle I have this camera at is actually more amenable to me standing up, frankly, for some of this painting that we're doing here. So I'm going to take some of this color and try to make it first a little bit more red and then more white using the white gouache that I've got. So I've got this Copics opaque white here, and it says it has a built-in fine brush. I use it as gouache because it's not waterproof. That's basically what it is, and they say that, they clarify that it is gouache and not ink because it's not waterproof. But you can basically dab that onto your palette and reuse it and use it. And I'm going to go ahead and dip into that. The brush isn't very good. It's like a very inaccurate brush, so even if you wanted to do a little stippling with this, you'd probably want to put it on a palette and then stipple that into, use a brush to stipple into it. But I'm going to go ahead and take some of this white. As you can see, it's very soluble, even the old stuff, because it is gouache and not ink. And mix that into that. I'm trying to make a skin color here to get started. A little bit more. But I had to test these. Hey, Edwidge is nice to see back in the old days. And I think she's in France, from what I remember. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to go ahead and start doing this. And let's see if I can sit down and feel like the angle is still right. I guess if I don't move my computer as much, it should be fine. Hey, Kat. So great to see you.
What a wonderful surprise.
I'm so glad to see Kat here too. I love it when patrons and friends show up. Alright, so I really do have to practice this because like I said, I'm going to be doing some live streams for the Art League, and I thought I needed to get back into practice doing some, you know, live streams free on YouTube before I did that. So because starting next weekend I am going to be doing the class live streams. So because this is opaque gouache, I'm going to go ahead and not really care about covering her whole face up here to that extent, and it's not really super opaque yet either, so you can see that it's actually quite translucent. Anything that gets covered up, we can always redraw it. And I went with a coloring book page because I happen to have this around, and I thought, well, am I going to use this? And I looked through the whole book, and I thought, I think there's 2 pages here that I'd actually want to color. So I tore those 2 pages out, kept a few of the other pages that I wanted, and I recycled the rest of the coloring book. If this wasn't locked down, I would have gone and donated it at the school or at the Art League. But since it's lockdown time, I just thought it would be easier instead of keeping it around just to go ahead and recycle the whole thing, because I know I'm not going to be using the rest of it. So I'm going to go ahead while I have this paint out fresh and go ahead and paint up everybody else's faces with the base color. And we are going to come back and tweak these colors, so try to make this a gouache stain and not like a fully opaque, you know, situation with the gouache here. We have plenty of time for that with the later stuff. And if you see any more comments, I can't see the screen anymore because I'm all the way back. I'm sitting down
That's what
now.
I'm here for.
Okay, you're right. You can do that. if you want to make any of your punny jokes, then as long as that's fine too, as long as they're not totally out of context. Let's see. I think
we can just hope this video goes viral.
Yeah, I don't think we're allowed to use that word anymore. What I've got going here. I think I'd be more comfortable if I open this up on my screen too. Let's see if I can. Do you have
Kat thinks it's great that you get to see the colors or palettes as well.
Yeah, I know Kat likes that. That's why I made sure to have that going on here.
But don't you need to see the reference? You're covering up your reference.
I am. I'm going to make this screen small on my computer screen and then move this over so I can see the reference and zoom in on the reference. And I just need to make sure I see my screen because now that I'm sitting down, I really don't know where I'm doing that. But if anybody needs me to, you know, to zoom in, then let me know. Okay, so, well, I mean, actually, I don't know how I would zoom in if you told me to zoom in. So I'm just going to take a little bit more of this paint and add a little bit more of the red to it to make it more of a reddish brown. As soon as you've got a reddish brown, whether if you already have an earthy color like that, when you add white to it, it's going to go right to a nice skin color, presumably. Now his face is drying out there, which isn't any good, so hopefully I can make this a little bit faster. A little bit more white. And I think I wrote down the hygiene tips that we were talking about for Corona that I think probably a lot of people know, but also didn't think it would hurt to let people know some of those tips. So I think I'll put them down over here and try
Blue Ren says, I like to block in all my midtones in a light wash when I start painting. It makes the whole process less intimidating than having huge expanses of white.
Yes, that is always a good idea. And frankly, if you want to, you can always, whether you're using an opaque medium and like acrylic or gouache or a transparent medium, obviously like watercolor, putting down those local staining colors is always a good idea. And because this is gouache, you can see I just took those hard edges and I'm just sort of scrubbing at them a little bit, and it lets me very easily sort of go into that and fix it. Same thing for over here. I can come back over here and just sort of scrub a bit. Don't even have to do that right now. I can come back and do it later when I'm going to come back and, you know, fix the skin with the details. But gouache is, even on this really cheap paper that's just cellulose, it's pretty easy to paint with gouache because an opaque color sits an ease of you know, manipulation of this medium versus having a medium that stains immediately like an ink or certain staining watercolor. But it's just a nice relaxing thing to do and talk to people. Online we'll probably be at this for 3 hours, I'd say. I hope, because I need to be able to use that energy for, like I said, we'll be doing some of this stuff next time around in next weekend. For the next 3 weekends, I'll be doing live streams for the Santa Cruz Art League, so I just wanted to do a few free ones on YouTube so I can make sure I still have my hand in for being able to do this properly. So I'm going to start with the skin here, and of course for the live streams, we're not going to be doing coloring book pages. People are not going to be paying to watch me paint coloring book pages. I'm going to be doing a drawing class, a grisaille underpainting class, and also a color theory class. Those are the 3 classes that I had still scheduled. They were supposed to be series and they got canceled because of the coronavirus lockdown, which is good and safe for the students. And so we're going to replace it for the people who already signed up to make it online, so that way they don't get to not make good use of that money. And also for any future classes, you know, I just don't know if the audience for that is young enough to be able to manipulate their way around a live stream, because, you know, when I used to teach at university, I had a younger audience and they were very tech savvy. But the audience that I have at the Art League is a very different audience. It's older people, so I don't know if they'll be able to find their way around online, even if it's just a YouTube link to a live stream. So we'll see after these 3 classes of, you know, if it doesn't work, then we'll just wait till the quarantine is over, God willing, and go back to doing that in person with people. And if it does work, then it'll be a not just an experiment, but a nice way to sort of branch out for the Art League. So we'll see how that goes. So that is going to be an interesting situation that develops, and we'll kind of see where it ends up. But I don't know if anybody has read this trilogy, but they would know the names of all these characters. Like I said, I only remember the names of like 3 of these characters. I'm kind of Earth, but with magic and elves and stuff like that. And like I was saying to people before, this is not the type of great fantasy storytelling as you would get with, like, say, older books. I just don't think the writing quality is there, but it's still an enjoyable thing to listen to on Audible. I think I listened to it a few years back. Okay, so I've got 2 more faces left that I wanted to stain into that color, so before I run out of this brown. And that's the other nice thing about these gouache colors is in stains and such, they really do go quite far. I mean, there's no running out of this very easily. I think I've had these colors on here for a while, and I do need to use them up. So this is a good way to do it, is to do these live streams. Get some more of this white, with the Copics white over there. But I hope everybody else is staying safe and healthy and clean at home. And I did want to, do you want to help me read these tips out loud to see what people can do, and hopefully that they're doing that? Not that much. I know you don't think it's that fun, but still, I think it's
You want me to read the tips?
Well, you can just leave it right there.
It sounds far less authoritative if it comes from me.
No, I think it sounds more authoritative if it comes from
right.
me. But you can read, no, leave it here so I can see if you're doing it right, and I can expound upon them. But by the way, my sister is a doctor. I was pre-med myself, and I'm pretty OCD. I took care of my mom when she was on chemo, and the nurses did tell me that my mom was the only patient they had that never got a secondary infection because of how clean I was. So given the fact that that works, I hope that lends a little bit of authority to the fact that I do think that these tips work. So here are my suggestions for what you can be doing.
So wash your hands.
Yeah, wash your hands, especially if you're out and before you eat and when you come back. And by that I mean 20 seconds for the actual scrubbing with the soap, and also 20 seconds to rinse off. So those are the two things that you should be doing. And you can count locomotives, you can count Mississippis, you can count hallelujahs, count whatever you want, but make sure it's 20 and 20 for both of those, and that will really work. And while you're outside,
Did you tell them to rinse them off for 20 seconds?
Yeah,
too?
so lather for 20 seconds and rinse off for 20 seconds. That really works because there's really just a lot of stuff left over on your hands if you don't do it for at least that long. And again, count Mississippis or hallelujahs or locomotives or whatever you want to in the middle of those numbers in between, so that you actually get a good amount of that in there. And let me get this last face up here with that stain. It's rather blotchy because it is a local stain, but it'll help us, like I said, get that skin color going. I noticed with these faces that they're really not all that complicated because a lot of the work has been done with the ink, so you want to make sure that you do all of that before you just do the stain, and it'll just let you approach it like a gouache piece and not like a watercolor piece where you're glazing section by section. So, and like, you know, somebody else was saying earlier, I think it was Blue Wren.
Kat says to sing happy birthday as you wash.
Yes,
That's
you can
what
also.
they did in cooking school.
Yes, you can also do that. Just don't speed up your singing for happy birthday, because you can sing happy birthday faster or slower. So depending on how you're singing it, you can go fast or slow. And I've really scrubbed at that part of that man's forehead, so he's got a rather blotchy forehead. It's okay, we'll fix it later. That's one thing that can't
Don't touch your face while you're out.
Yeah, don't touch your
Rule
face
number
while you're out.
2.
Don't touch your face while you're out. And by that, I mean, if you're outside and you're shopping and your nose itches or your eyes itch, and try really hard to use the back of your hand or your shoulder to do that instead of doing anything. I've actually done this for so many years now that it's natural for me not to do that when I'm out. So with other people, it has to be something that's a bit more targeted. So just try to be careful about that. And also, once you have done that and you're back home, you know, there's a few other rules that might be a little bit difficult for people to follow, but I think if you start to follow them, they will be, you know, become second nature after a while, and probably good in the era of resistant germs anyway to follow some of these rules. But before I get to that, let me explain what I'm doing here with these colors. So this person's wearing like a gray-blue, kind of an indigo colored jacket. So I'm looking at the and not a he, and I think she did a really good job of making these faces and characters compelling. All the other art just wasn't up to par, so like I said, I recycled the rest of the coloring book except for a few pages. But I managed to search for her, and I looked for this illustration to see if she had any colors for this, and she did. So at least now I have the illustration colors for this particular piece. Not all of them, just like 1 or 2 of them. There is color versions online by the artist. And so he has like a grayish indigo colored jacket. So I'm going to go ahead and deluminate, you know, bring the chroma down of this, de-intensify it. So I can add orange in it to make it a browner color, or I can just add this brown that I have left over because it's very conveniently there. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that, and that'll turn it into an indigo color for me right here. And I think I'm going to switch to a larger brush because I want a larger amount of space being colored there. So I'll switch to this wedge that I was showing earlier. And I will have an edited version, I assume, of this stream. I'm not guaranteeing it, that I might leave up. But if this ends up being too long and clunky, then I'll just take it down and only you guys will end up seeing it. So enjoy it while you can, because I'm not guaranteeing that it'll come back up. Okay, so let's test this on a swatch someplace. Usually I have some paper around here that can be swatched on, but Looks like not right now. I've got a blank piece of wood here. I'll just use that. It's because I have a watercolor paper glued onto the other side, and as something that I'm going to be painting, I'm going to be painting a fox on that later at some point, and wanted to do a sleeping fox on there. I did for a drawing class, and I thought it'd be good on an ornament. Okay, so I'm swatching that, and it's pretty close to that. Hers has a little bit more purple in it. I think I will leave it this color because I know she made the background very purple, so I think that given that we're going to make the background very purple, I think this indigo is good. So let's mix a big puddle of this for the rest of this, and let me make sure that's on screen right now. And I'm going to go ahead and add this blue. This is all very creamy, and if I run out of these colors, I'm going to switch to the art graphs. I did say I wanted to compare them at some point on a live stream because they're not light fast, so it's actually a pretty good idea to use them on a coloring book because the Creative Colors are light fast, but this paper is not, you know, archival, so you should probably use, you could use more subpar materials. And like I said, the art graphs might actually be quite nice, but we actually don't know because there's no ratings for them on that. So I'm going to get my angle brush, and I'm going to start to do the shading starting on the first layer of the jacket here. So unlike the faces, I'm going to come back, like I said, to the faces later. And I can see a highlight going down that back side. And I'm going to invent some of this stuff because it's a rather easily colored illustration. But let's leave some rim lighting back there, like I can see in that illustration. And now this part is white here, so you can always correct the gouache by lifting it up. Now I see a piece of, I think this is because this is colored, this is watercolor pencil that I had on the palette, so there might be some pieces of watercolor pencil. They're not fully dissolved here. It can go pretty fast if you make it opaque, and that's why I wanted to do that, is because this paper just isn't nice enough to not make it opaque. It would end up being very difficult to paint on this paper. You would want to use dry media if you were doing this if you weren't doing like a gouache, because the dry media is going to be much more amenable to this weak paper. You know, the paper's going to withstand that versus the water and the wet medium and everything like that. Does anybody have any questions or comments about any of this?
Not yet.
Not yet. They're just watching me color this blue.
There's just 18 people watching you color it blue.
Okay.
Not 16. You have not received another thumbs down yet.
Okay, well that's good. So let's see, I've got this indigo, like I said, this ultramarine blue mixed with that burnt umber makes a lovely indigo. And that's because the burnt umber, or sepia for that matter, or even burnt sienna, they're kind of like an orange, and blue and orange are complements. So desaturating effect, complementary effect when you mix brown and blue together. Okay, so I'm going to come right up to here, and I'm going to leave that. And if it is uneven anywhere, then that's actually okay, because we're going to come back and, like I said, layer more. But frankly, given that this is a coloring book page, I'm not going to go for the level of perfection in shading that I do for, you know, paper that's, you know, something that's being painted on watercolor paper. If you remember those Muha coloring book pages that we did, this is going to be about that level of finish. And it can get to be pretty nice, especially when you're working with gouache. You guys have seen that. You can sort of, you know, layer it up with that opaque gouache, and it really does work nicely. So I'm leaving that rim lighting there, and I can see that there's a little bit of that fading to purple, so it doesn't go like directly to actual white. So what I'm going to do is just take a little bit of this purple right here, and I'm going to throw it into a corner right here, and mix this into a nice blue violet-y type color. And I'm going to go ahead and take a very watery version of that and swipe that down the side to give me my rim lighting. And you can see that makes it a little bit more natural. And you can go along the edge in a soft motion, like I've shown people how to blend soft edges. Just sweep along the edge there, and you've got yourself that rim lighting there. And you can think these areas right here she ended up coloring dark anyway. And so go ahead and do that. And I think the rim lighting extends all the way to the top of the collar, so it goes to right there, and then it switches back to the dark blue over here. This is going to be a complicated piece because there's a lot of characters here, but I was planning on doing a 3-hour stream, so I just didn't want to run out of something to do. If I don't finish, that's fine, and I think this white, could you give me the gel pen that's inside of that drawer over there? I think what I'm going to do for this white scroller.
There you go.
Yeah. While we're waiting for that to dry, let me show real quick this little brooch that I was working on. It's all varnished and everything. It's got a little shoe on it, some flowers. This is for a friend that I painted. This is, I think, gouache, and then metallic mica paint, watercolor in the back, and then varnished with an acrylic varnish, so it's waterproofish. Sides gold, and the back is just a button that I mounted a brooch on. And so this is for a friend that just had foot surgery, and I'm going to send it to her in the mail at some point because we're all in lockdown. But she's somebody who lives locally in Santa Cruz, and she has, you know, both of her feet are in casts, and she's had surgery, so I just thought she'd appreciate a nice, you know, a little brooch with a little shoe and flowers in it. So I did that, I think a few days ago. I think the day before yesterday. Okay, I think that's dry-ish. And then continue down the side of the jacket. I think what I wanted to do before I moved on is get, let's see, I just wanted to see if this worked on here. A little scroll work in gel pen. Can you guys see that, or is that fine for me to leave it at that distance, you think?
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Okay. I'm putting in that white in here.
Kat says, this somehow reminds me of Muha, the halo and the swirly bits, and she loves the indigo, and she also thinks it's sweet that you painted somebody a shoe.
Yeah, thanks,
You
Kat.
painted more shoes for people. I think that shoes are your favorite thing now, right?
What do you
painted
mean?
a lot of shoes.
What shoes? What are the other shoes?
What about the Pika shoe?
Oh, that Pikachu. Yeah, but no, it's a
lot of shoes you paint.
It's a different kind of shoe. But I'm gonna.
You'll be known as the shoe person.
That white gel go down in history as having painted shoes.
Right.
I'm gonna go ahead and that white gel pen just isn't strong enough, so I'm gonna come back in with this. And see, it's much stronger. And she's right. All the swirls are definitely Art Nouveau influenced, and I think it's because he's supposed to be king of the arabesques and Middle Eastern influenced. So you know, they have the different elves had like a day court, a night court, a summer court, an autumn court type of thing. And I think that's what they did for the aesthetics here. That's why they've got like these little belly shirts and all that kind of stuff. And they sort of added a little bit of a goth feel to it. So it's like if you wanted to mix that with the goth thing, because they've got the tattoos. Oops, I've got a little blurb of white that I spit onto the paper there. It's okay. It'll live. And come back and fix it with some indigo in between. But that's what I'm going to do with the white parts of it. And I think the indigo is going to look real nice. I actually really like the dark surly colors myself. I feel like, I think maybe that's why I was okay doing this page, is maybe subconsciously I thought Art Nouveau and arabesques and all that stuff. But yeah, it's very nice in that sense. Okay, and it is just cheap pulp paper, you know, so the paper is just cellulose. So if you want to work with color pencil on it or marker on it or some dry gouache like I'm doing here,
basically the quality of paper you commonly use as opposed to using your good
Oh,
paper.
shut up. I use nice paper. I just, it took me a while to get more brave with my nice paper because I had a lot of cheaper paper and I thought, okay, we should use that cheaper paper. Oh, the other thing I wanted to do here that I don't see done in the actual original is we can pick up some of that for folds because it's gouache. So I can pick up some of this with a wet, damp brush. You can see me doing that right there and create some wrinkles and do the same thing back here. So there's like a shoulder fold right here. Go ahead and lift a little bit of that. And it causes, you know, you can see how that gouache is lifting pretty much right back up. And see how this is coming towards the front here? So it would have like a lighter highlight right there. The part that's nearest to me would have a lifted highlight, right? That's how I'm imagining that. That's my made up way of figuring out my shadows and my darker and lighter colors is what's the part that you'll color fill. So it's not like super useful, but yeah, you can do that. So I've done that, and everywhere else you can lay down a flatter color. And I feel like right here also is a good place to lift wrinkles right in that armpit area where you can see the wrinkles right in the drawing. So go ahead and lift that up and then use a paper towel. Now shift your paper towel over because if you dab it with the same spot, you're probably going to redeposit some of that paint. But see how it's giving you a nice earthy feel to that because the texture in the gouache mixed with the fact that we're doing some wrinkles. And if I make that gouache thicker, then we won't have that texture. But I kind of like that velvety texture that has developed there. I think I might really enjoy the men's costumes here because of that indigo. I'm going to switch to a bigger brush again. This angle brush just isn't carrying enough paint for me to be feeling like it's worth it. And why do I have this many palettes out? Well, I had leftover paint on a lot of palettes, and they were the colors I needed. And so therefore they are out. I'm going to put that one there so I don't forget about it, because I do want to use that one too. And I wanted to have some of this towel uncovered. Alright, so got that. I guess I should mix up a nice big batch of it. So maybe just use the rest of this brown and bring in the rest of this blue over here. So, as long as people don't literally mind watching paint dry, but I'll try to go as fast as I can to mix this up. You know, there's a real-time video. Here it is. Real-time mixing. This is an ultramarine blue that I had from the color pencils left over, watercolor pencil. So that's the shavings that I put over there. And again, let's just make sure my swatch is the same color. So a little bit brighter. So you can see how it's bluer and not as gray. So more brown to desaturate. I got a little bit of green there in the corner. I think it'll just be swallowed up, but if you did think it was going to make... because we're not really using that color right now. Just going to hurry up and do that. I think I used these colors for that data viz bear too. Some of them anyway. You know, that data visualization bear that we were working on. Kat was there for that one too. Luckily she saved me from having a bear with a bloody tattooed chest, because I had no idea that that's what it looked like when I wrote that, and then I changed it to a button with a different color. So that worked out alright. Okay, let's see if that was... That's a little bit too dark. Not enough blue, so bring back some more of that blue. This is what color mixing looks like, folks. A dab of this, a dab of that. It's kind of like cooking, right? Yeah, if you cook like I do, where you taste test it and you add some, lose some, dilute it, you know, do all that stuff. That's the way my mom cooked, so that's how I cooked too. I don't really use exact measurements. I use more sort of a taste test type of thing. So it's the same thing with your paint colors. You really can get that exact same color again. You just have to dab it a few times. Okay, there we go. So we got that. Put this back over here, and let's try to get as much of his uniform in as possible, and we'll come back and lift the highlights in the solid colors. We might even do that for the skin, where we lift the highlights, because again, that's the kind of paper this is. So let's go and take care of that so we can get to some more of the interesting bits. I've always found this to be very meditative. If anybody has any coloring that they're doing along with, then...
Cat said LOL. But Shauna Riley has a more thoughtful comment. Cat. She said, color mixing is the most time-consuming part of my painting process.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think the layout for me, I go to plan the layout for a long time. Like for this miniatures piece that I was working on recently, I was trying to do all these different circles that are going to end up being maritime. You know, there's going to be different, like a seahorse, jellyfish, octopus, and all that stuff. It's part of like that befriend thing, but I had to do a whole deal for the different colors. So there's a lot of planning that I do. Most of my planning goes into the layout part of it, and then the color part of it, and then the drafting is, you know, takes a lot of time and concentration, so you can get the drafting accurate. But once you actually get to the painting, I think I've had like probably 60, maybe even 70% of my work is already done, because I did all of that in the layout, the composition, and the color wheel, and figuring out the limited color scheme and all of that stuff. It's just most of the work for me for an original piece. With a piece like this, where I'm using leftover colors, and also where it's not an original piece, it's more like a study, you know, because basically that's what this is. It's not a master study, but it is a study of somebody else's piece that you're sort of working on. Then, you know, it's just less work. And if you notice what I'm doing here is I'm carrying the wet bead down along the side of the jacket, instead of letting it dry like I did when I was sort of half talking and doing that. It'll make it so that, just like when we're doing the skin, the color dries evenly. So instead of having it dry with more blotches in it, like we have up there, if you carry the wet bead down of the paint, whether it's watercolor or gouache, you'll end up with an even wash. And you
Isn't that one of those tips that you said you weren't going to share with people? Aren't you giving away too expensive tips?
No. Everybody on my channel.
Only for paid members.
Yeah, no, there's very few tips left.
Gilder's Sleeve says, love watching a pro mix their colors. I think it is the place I struggle a lot in my painting. Getting the right color is a challenge for me. Mostly I just go with close enough. So maybe if you have more valuable tips that you're willing to give away for free on some random live stream, maybe you could help.
Well, I have 2 very good color mixing videos, but I do have a color theory live stream coming up next weekend, actually. And maybe you don't want to plunk down the $35 for it because it's through the Art League, so the Art League is doing that. But if you are an ex-patron or a long-term viewer, I can, you can talk to me about that. We can do maybe separate live streams, but for that you'd get the 3 the phone or email to give you input over everything that you created for the assignments. And so that's what I'm doing, but I do think I'm going to continue to show color theory anytime I put anything up. So if you can't afford that, then you'll always have my videos, but definitely I'm doing a lot more of my instruction through the Art League and such nowadays, just to focus my energy in that direction. But it is going to be a very informative live stream. So we're going to do all sorts of limited palettes and do a subject in the different limited schemes and repeat that and do a whole lot of our gamuts and wheels. Okay, so I've got his jacket. I think she's got almost the same color on her, except for a bit more purple. These 2 guys have the same color on them as well. But I think instead of making it a really boring flat fill constantly, let's go ahead and finish one person at a time, because I think that if you are just joining on a stream, it'll become rather trying if you just have to watch me do the flat fills. So I'm going to come back here and work this up to a better level of finish, and finish one person at a time, and that just means I'm going to have to mix the batches of color separately, because it'll just make it more entertaining, for people. But one of the best tips I can give you for color mixing, frankly, is study your complementary pairs and study how to replace a primary with a more neutral primary, an earthier primary, and as a result of that you will start with a limited mood and a limited gamut of colors. And what's going to end up happening as a result of that is you're going to know exactly what your range of colors is and what you can mix, and then you can sort of have the same maximum 6 colors to use while you're going to be mixing something, and therefore you can't really have too much trouble if you know that those are the only colors that you're using. So the first step to that is to make sure you limit your colors to less than 6, and then after that make sure you don't make sure you know all of the mixes in between those colors, and also how complements can neutralize and how a single earth color can neutralize, and so on and so forth. And probably another very valuable thing for color theory is just is when you're looking at your colors, it's not to think that you can mix your variation of it using the colors you have. It's pretty amazing, actually, the amount of colors that are mixable from the limit of colors you got available. Okay, so you can see I made that jacket darker so it's more even back here. I'm going to do another pass around down here. And it looks like this is sticking pretty well. People always say you can't, some people have trouble layering gouache. The key to that is, how you have a fat over lean rule for oil? It's similar with gouache, except for it goes with less and less water. So you do have fat over lean in that instead of reducing the oil content, you are reducing the water content when you layer with gouache, unless you want it to scoot or lift, in which case you can use some water to lift it up like I was doing for those highlights. But apart from that, it can really go down nice and easily to layer over. And if you want to layer a lighter color over a darker color, or it's turned into a big fat mess, then lift up as much of it as you can first, and then come back and put the correct color in. So don't just keep layering over it. If it becomes more than 3 or 4 layers and it's turning into a muddy mess, then you're probably better off just lifting up that color and putting the right color in, because otherwise it's not going to layer cleanly. But if you have a few layers and you know what you're doing, then it's fine not to have to lift up. Okay, so I did that. I think that's about as even as I want it there. I'm going to come back in and over here add in a little bit of a line here to give him back his little arabesques on his collar, and just carve in right here, and really nice effects right there doing that. Okay, so I think now I'm going to start to lift out the highlights out of his jacket, and that way we'll have a nice, are you sure I shouldn't zoom in? It looks like it's a really big screen. Are you sure you want me to zoom in? Or?
People have said things are fine. You can ask them.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think it'll be best because we don't have to move it around.
Looks fine to me.
Okay, but if
and
anybody...
Plus, people love seeing palettes when you're painting.
Okay. Alright, so let's unfold this napkin again. And let's take this angle brush and...
Shoes off. Tell them a new coronavirus.
If you had outdoor shoes and indoor shoes. So if you have slippers at home, we already talked about the hand washing and the other stuff earlier, and not touching your face while you're out and all that jazz. Also, when you come back in, please make sure that you try to keep your outdoor shoes and your outside clothes even, okay? And this is something that we actually got from a tip from somebody who works at a hospital about the outdoor clothes and also about the shoes, okay? And also about parcels. So if you get something from outside, leave it alone for 72 hours because you don't know how long it was since somebody touched it who might have been sick. So either leave the package alone for 72 hours or wipe the contents when you pull them out and wash your hands afterward after you're done wiping them with some disinfectant wipes. You know, and better not to order huge gobs of stuff right now that you don't need, but if you do get something that you need, then you can wipe it off. Make sure you have outdoor clothes, so get back into your indoor clothes or your PJs when you're at home and have outdoor clothes when you go out. That will help you a lot. It will go really far in making sure you are isolating the germs that you have that you can sort of track back inside. And I think also if you've got slippers for your bathroom, and that would be helpful if you kept them in your bathroom and then for the rest of your house you had different shoes or slippers. I know that sounds stupid, but it's actually very, very useful because then you'll keep your bathroom germs in the bathroom, you'll keep your outdoor germs outside, and the rest of your house you can sort of do whatever you want in. You can touch your face, you can hang about, you can do whatever because it's a safe, clean space. And then you just have to watch out for those certain spaces. And again, this is something that we're probably going to have to follow not just for this particular virus, but also going forward in the future with more resistant germs and less effective antibiotics. It's probably a much better way to prevent getting sick, you know, is to do that. And that's, I think, and then I think the last one before that was they were telling from another hospital, you know, tip was to make sure you flush your toilet with the lid closed, right? So I think that's pretty much.
That's the end of your coronavirus tips?
I think so. Let me make sure I have.
You've got a comment from Sean O'Reilly.
Mm-hmm.
I could use more planning in my process. It would probably colors don't contrast as much as I'd like, or my piece starts to look cluttered. I need to put more importance on the actual planning because it is one of the most important parts. I need more patience instead of wanting to jump straight in.
Yeah, I can totally empathize with that. And I know thumbs, everybody hates thumbnails. But when you do a thumbnail, you know, it doesn't have to be complicated. Sometimes I just draw blobs, like I've drawn here, you know, like I was showing with these colors. I just draw blobs someplace, and it shows me the color layout. And then another place I'll do just lines, and there'll be the line layout, and I can combine it. But sometimes, you know, the planning doesn't have to be, I see some people's thumbnails are like, well, these are my thumbnails, and they're super, super planned out, you know, like way more planned out than I would say that you needed to have. So remember when you do your planning for your colors or your thumbs, it doesn't have to be super, super finished. It just has to be clear and it has to work. So when you look at it, it has to be effective. So I've lifted a highlight over here for his collar. I'm thinking about down here, he'd have some shadow and then he'd have maybe a teeny bit of light bouncing up from right there. So I'm going to go ahead and I think Thomas Blackshear is a great artist if you like to do gouache lift out techniques. Thomas Blackshear is a very famous old school illustrator, and he's done a lot of beautiful paintings for churches and for you know, wildlife and that kind of stuff like that. But he's done some amazing realistic stuff, and he uses a gouache pick out technique. And I was actually doing gouache pick out before I knew about Thomas Blackshear, but he does it in a very complete technique. Like he does that for a whole piece. Like I do it partially where I lift out highlights. He does it constantly where like he'll just put down a lot of stuff and then constantly lift out. And so he's got, if you like lift out techniques where you put down the gouache and then you lift out the way that people do with gouache or oil sometimes, then check out Thomas Blackshear. I think he only has a few videos online. I think you can buy them off of like Gumroad. I only bought one. It's the one with the rooster in it, and I thought it was really cool what he was doing there. I wouldn't do as much of the lift out as he was doing. Sure, if you're using gouache and you can see that it picks up. Okay, so I think over here around that area where I did lift out that and made it lighter, I think I'm going to go back and darken this part up. And that's the nice thing about gouache is that unlike a lot of other mediums that stain and whatever, it's actually easier to fix. And so I'm going to go ahead and make that darker. I don't like that. So I think that's pretty good for his jacket there. I'm going to come in with the silver areas, and I think they're more of a purplish gray. So again, I'm going to do like a little bit of that purple from right here, add it here, and make it a very diluted, dull it down just a little bit to make it blue-violet with that indigo, and a lot more water in it, so it's basically glazed. No shame in using some water for gouache if you're using it in sheer areas as a highlight. I've always said that. You know, you can, of course, mix a lot of white into this purple and make it an opaque purplish tint. But you can also use a sheer purplish tint with water if you're doing that. Now she has this like as a gray digital fill, like it's like a light gray digital fill, but I think I prefer
Another
it to.
question from Gilder's Sleeve. Gilder's Levy. On the lower left of your screen, is that a dry towel you're wiping?
Actually got sent in the mail to me by a patron, Kat, and a nice friend, lovely nice gift to get is a palette or a towel from any of your friends if you're painting. But if you have a nice towel here, not only is it reusable like a paper towel because you can go and wash it, but you can really meter the amount of water you have in your brush, and I need to do that constantly, especially for more complicated paintings, like, you know, stuff that I really care about, not just coloring book pages like this one. But sometimes you've got too much water and you can meter it, and also after you go to get your paints, you want to meter the water off, because I have a lot of students go right from rinsing right to their palette, and unless you want to dilute your paint, what you end up doing is having too much water in your paint, and you don't really want that. That's not a good idea, because then you just end up having paints that are getting waterier as you're using them. You can add a little bit of water to them, but not like on accident, not like just, you know, incidental water that you're constantly carrying over with your brush as you're rinsing it off. So keep that in mind, that, you know, you want to keep your paints at a creamy, half and half consistency at least, and then even thick cream if you're working with gouache. If it's any thinner than that, then you're basically just painting with watercolor, in which case that's fine, but that's a watercolor style, not gouache style. And you're going to have trouble on cheap paper like this if it's very thin. The paper will warp. You can see this paper has not warped at all, even though it's cheap cellulose, and that's because I didn't come on here and drop a huge gob of water on it. So I've gone ahead and done that. I think I want to dual tone this and add some dark and light to that at some point, but I think what I'm going to do is leave that alone for now, and then go ahead and do his face and his hair, which is interesting because his face is very, he's got like a tannish, swarthier color there, and he's got blue eyes, so let's go to a cleaner blue. Sort of made him have ghostly, elvish blue eyes, so a really, really sharp blue. So let's go ahead and put that in. And I can see that what I would want to do for this is give it a little bit of a highlight on this side. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that out just the teeniest bit. Teeniest bit on this side. Not going to be as noticeable to you at home, but I can see it. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of this duller blue color right here, and this is where I feel like it would be better if it was a little bit closer, is I'm going to go ahead and in the top of his eye right here, along where the shadow is being cast onto his eyeball, go ahead and put some of that indigo blue there and into that socket. Okay, so that's that. And then the center of that is black, so I think I do have some black here. You can also use a black marker. I'm going to switch to my smaller brush even. And this is watercolor pencil on this palette, and that's Cretacolor gouache on that palette. So I'm going to be using the combination is opaque. And he's got a very nice glower almost there, very nice mood for his face. And I'm going to go ahead and again shadow a little bit of that indigo right over the top of his eye, going straight across. I don't know how well that's going to show up in the full page screen here, but just an idea. So here's an example. Hold on, let's see. On another page. So here's what I'm going to be teaching next week. And so if you have an eye like this, this is what I'll be teaching for the drawing class, actually the week after next week for the scale. But we're doing these 4 demos and drawing them in 4 different ways. And the eye here has a shadow that goes over the top of the eyelid. You can see I drew that in there. It's cast down from the eyelid onto the top of the eye. Also, you have a highlight that sits right there, and depending on which direction of the light is, it could be in different areas, but the direct opposite of where you see that highlight, you'll have a lighter cone of light coming down there, okay? That's why it's light down here in the actual iris area over here. And then over here you'll see the striations of that, and then you've got the pupil there, and then the sclera and all that other stuff, the cornea and everything like that. You've got this part that's going to be the highest angle when you draw that in, and that's going to match the highest angle of this lid. And as I was saying to people in the drawing class that we taught in person, this distance of the eyelid changes over the day. So when you wake up, this distance is shorter, and as you walk around during the day, this distance gets higher. So even your own eyelid distance between these two folds will get shorter and longer throughout the day. So it varies between people and types of eyelids, and also varies throughout the day, and also with age. So those are all things to keep in mind when you're drawing or painting that. But that's the kind of shadow that, even though you can't see it because it's further away, that I am trying to put in right here across the top of his eye to say that the lid is casting cornea. There will be a little bit of pinkish, so I'm going to get some of that pink and pick it up. And again, this is not in the reference there, but this is something that I know to do. This is all stuff you can add in yourself once you know. So I'm going to add a little bit of that red, and just see how, if you could see this closer up, that red really makes them pop. Just if I put that red right there in that corner there, and turn it into that little bit of membrane that we see outside of the cornea that has that veinish red color to it, and you can see it in the corner of your eye if you look. Okay, so I've got that for the most part. I do want to shade that eye a bit more, so let's see, I'm going to take a darker color here. Let's work up his face in as much detail as we can. Let's see how much this paper can stand. So let's take a little bit of this brown, and let's go ahead, and I'm going to, with him, probably just do the actual brown, because it's he's a little bit swarthier. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come back and smooth out his skin just a bit, because I feel like he's got a little bit of unevenness to his skin tone, and if it doesn't work with this brush, like if it makes it worse, then I'm just going to let it be, and then come back in, and as I'm painting, fix it. So that's probably going to be the case. I even got a piece of lint in there, which isn't any good. And let's go ahead and redo that part of it real quick. Just drop that down, make it an even wash. I'm going to rinse this off because I don't actually want to make it a full face of new paint, but I just want to dilute it out at the edges here and repaint that part so it doesn't look like I blotted it out in the center there. And like I said, I might actually lift into this for highlights, so I don't want to completely destroy this paper right now chewing it up, because I do want to lift highlights in it. Okay, so now I feel like he's got these darker shadows that's coming over to his face, because he's more of a, like I said, a swarthy person, and also the character is like a brooding, person. So as a result of that, you want to have a lot more shadows here. And what we're going to do is take, and I feel like that brown would work if I used it probably in a slightly lower intensity, so a bit more yellow to that brown. So let's go ahead and put that over there. Let's mix a nice little mix of that right here. Pick up some of this brown that I had. This brown is actually left over from painting a bear, so I had a bear of this color, but it's good for skin tones if you alter it here and there. So that's not really yellow enough for my taste, but let's see if I can alter it just a bit more. Maybe a little bit of this lighter yellow. We'll bring it down. And I didn't wet this color before starting, so it needs a little bit more work. Okay, that's looking a little bit better. And I remember I am going to use it in slightly smaller amounts and not like a huge amount, so should be okay. I'm going to go ahead and add the rest of this yellow. Okay, that's lovely. I'm just sad that's going to run out before I get to the other people's faces, because that's basically the color I want for the rest of it. Okay, so let's try to use a not very hard brush for that, so that I can blend off the edges. Unfortunately, this is a hard brush because it's a spotter, that's a spotter, that's a spotter, so I think the softest brush I got is actually this one. And when you're laying down a delicate layer of paint, you don't want it to lift the layer of paint below, so try to use a light hand when you're applying gouache. So go ahead and do that. This paint's just a little bit waterier than I would want it, but that's okay too. I'm going to go ahead and just use that like that, coming down the side, and put some of this shadow right under his eye. And it's going to go right up into his brow bone, coming out to his outer lid. It says live.
Okay, well maybe it'll come back. It's still spinning for me, so we have to assume that people are listening as it's buffering and recording.
Wow, that's really irritating.
It is really irritating.
Isn't this why we stopped doing live streams before?
Could be.
Yeah. This is why I stopped doing live streams before, is because they keep dropping the thing. And
Chat says buffering is painful. Looks like you're back. You can get back to your work.
Okay, did it come back?
Yes.
Okay.
Screen is live.
Okay, good.
Says.
All right. This is why I hate YouTube live streaming. And I'm kind of worried that the people at the older students at SCAL next weekend when we do this
we can
live
just
stream.
keep track of it and respond when it happens. Everybody knows there's technical difficulties.
Yeah, but I'm just worried about people at, you know, those older people who are going to be doing these live streams through SCAL. I think they're going to be really, it's going to be a harder time for them to figure this out. You know what I'm saying?
Just blame it on them.
Blame it on them.
It's never happened before. This must be your fault.
Blame it.
I've never heard of this happening.
Just do a live stream for
Right.
SCAL next weekend and be all like, this has never happened before, you guys. I've always loved YouTube
Right.
live streaming. Oh no, they just have to watch any of my past live stream recordings where I'm constantly basically cursing YouTube live streaming, and then they'll know that that's not true.
MJ Pete says patience is learned, right?
Yeah, I'm still waiting to learn it, Michael. Okay, so I'm going ahead and adding the shading, again giving him this dramatic rim lighting here. Suits the character and the original artist vision for how this is doing, is like all this rim lighting. So added the rim lighting to under his eye, brow bone, nose, cheek on the other side, underneath his nose on this side. It's carried over here to almost a triangle shape, so we gotta do that Rembrandt lighting shape over there. Make that a little bit less prominent, make it shade off a bit, but have that triangle right there. And rim lighting always makes everybody look more dramatic, so if you're going for a dramatic action type scene, then you can do that. And
Valeria Badra says, oh my god, my gouache paints just arrived. This live is such a blessing, yay.
Oh, great. And by the way, I've got a gouache playlist with free videos on it on YouTube, so make sure you check out all of my gouache videos, because I give tips on how you can use your gouache.
And Elisa Walsh says, hello everyone.
Hi, I'm so glad that people decided to come back after the stream dropped. That's very nice of people. And for other people who don't know, I don't know what I was talking about. The stream has been fine.
Wow.
I hate YouTube live streaming when it drops stuff. This is why I feel like it's better to pre-record it and it's not live and then just upload it so there's no technical difficulties. But on the other hand, you just don't get to talk to people live. You know, you don't get to say live Q&A and all that. Okay, so for his ear socket, and again, another thing I'll be drawing in the drawing class the week after next. But you have different people, you know, have different ears, obviously, and just like nobody has the same eye or lips or nose or whatever, your ear will also be different and have different amounts of folds in it and different kinds of folds, and you know, no two ears are alike. If you actually go and look at ears of your friends or you know, Google ears online or anything, just don't look for anybody who has ears that are sick, because God, if you, that's one of the reasons why I didn't become a doctor.
That one's a dark place.
Yeah. Hi.
Let's maybe change the ear conversation to a pleasant hello.
Look for healthy ears, the end. But anyway, the ear is it's recessed, right? You've got these folds that are recessed. So even in this picture here that is very simple, you want to give the idea of why is there a piece of lint in that stupid face right there? Okay, not going to talk about that lint right there. We'll go back and try to figure it out. I think it's actually dug itself into the paper. But anyway, I'm going to color that hollow there, and you can see it hollows out to that area. And same thing for this part right here. And so the darker parts will look like they're set further back, and then the lighter part will come forward. And you can see that happening, hopefully, as I'm coloring that with that gouache, and you can see how it sets it back. And remember not to use a huge amount of water, especially on paper like this. It is not going to put up with it. If you want to use water, then use watercolor paper. If you are using a cheaper paper, then limit the amount of water you have. And you can see what I'm doing. This is not wet on wet, this is wet on dry. And also my paints are opaquish. So again, half and half for cream consistency, no thinner than that, and don't constantly, you know, import more water into your paints over there. Okay, so going under the neck is going to have rim lighting, just like the back of the jacket. We chose rim lighting, right? So we can't now go and make that inconsistent. That's the thing about lighting or colors or shading, is you just have to make it consistent. Even if you're making it up, in this case we're semi-making it up and semi-using the reference here to guide us as to what's going on. But you do want to make sure that the rim lighting is consistent on the angles and the sides. Okay, I also see, like, we should put some shading right here. Like if you had a rabbit ear, you'd go ahead and, because those are the only ears that I've painted that are so pointed, you'd go and put a little bit of that into the fold there and shade out. So there he's got like a nice, and high contrast is better. Aim for more contrast versus the big constantly over and over again. And also timid drafting, because they don't have enough freehand drafting skills, and so it shows up in their painting as well, with timid painting and timid drafting skills. But one of them is very easily fixable. It's just exaggerate your values, and for the other one, then just get more painting and drafting practice. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and shade out towards the neck here so I can get a little bit of a gradient there, and there we go. That part is done. I'm trying to see for his face if I want to add any other shadows. Okay, yeah, I want to add some shadows coming from underneath his hair. And also he's got a nice cheekbone here. And also probably want to add a little bit of ruddy color along the cheek. It'll probably also help to hide that lint or destroyed paper that's a little bit destroyed there. Because, you know, I was saying that at the beginning, which is expect that to happen for this because this is coloring book paper. So a little bit of lighting right there to show the hair falling on his forehead, the shadow of the hair falling on his forehead, rim lighting in the corner there, and more shadow of that hair falling all along his hairline, you know, because this is sitting on top of his head, and it's, so think of like a little wig you put on top of an egg, so you're going to need some shadow underneath that hair coming over there, and even up to over here. It'll make the hairline look more natural when we color it, to have a little bit of shadow there. And lastly, let's make sure we've got enough. So I've got enough over here. I think I've made that socket dark enough. He's a guy, so we're not going to go and give him too much color in his lips, but we can give him a bit of shadow in between his lips right here, and also shade that side of it, because that's the side that's facing away from the light, and like I said, along the cheekbone here. So let's bring that, I'd say, down from here. Let's go past the line and then over here, and then soften it out on both sides.
MJ,
I have tried acrylic gouache. It's just matte acrylic, because that's what it is. It's called acrylic gouache because it gives you that look, but it's basically just a matte acrylic. So if you have matte acrylics, you have acrylic gouache, and if you've got semi-gloss or satin acrylics, then those are a more conventionally, you know, like the more commonly used acrylic by some people, and there's also the high gloss acrylics. But yeah, it's just acrylic with a matte finish, so that it looks like it's gouache or very matte when it's done being painted. And the other thing about it, of course, is that it's waterproof. So you could, you know, correct over it without anything lifting, just like you can with other acrylic paints. Whereas this is correctable and also liftable, so that has its pros and cons, because you can end up being rather irritated by it, of course, because you end up having, you know, the gouache, you know, making it so that you are constantly lifting it, and therefore it's irritating you. I actually prefer it because the cleanup is so easy versus acrylic, and it's less wasteful and bad for the environment. And in some ways it actually is a pro and not just something you're doing for the environment, because I actually like to correct on the paper.
MJ Pete also said, I saw a video where the artist sprayed fixative to stabilize the coloring book paper for acrylic paint.
Yeah, you could do that. You could also use...
also, so it does not reactivate, right?
Yep, yeah, you can do that in between layers to do that for your gouache or your watercolor. You could also use watercolor ground. I've done that before in another demo. I'm lifting this along the edge of his nose here to get a proper highlight, because remember I said I was going to go back and give him some proper highlights in some of these areas. So I'm doing that across his nose right there, and also on the top of his lip. And I'm going to come back with a yellow, whitish, glowy color, because that'll give him a little bit more magical pop right there. But yeah, you can use a You can use a fixative between layers to make layers in between permanent so nothing lifts below. You can also use watercolor ground for the same purpose, because it's basically an acrylic that dries more porous, so you can paint with watercolor and gouache over it. I prefer to just work without that, so it's easier for me to figure out what my, you know, like just what I'm doing is less complicated than the fixatives, but for some people they work great, and they, you know, have more experience with them. Okay, so I'm going to try to get the, I used them a lot in high school though. I used a lot of fixative for charcoal and pencil drawings, graphite drawings. Okay, so I've got this white, and I'm going to mix a little bit of, in fact, white's kind of muddy as well, so I might have to make it, okay, so here's a yellow, nice bright yellow, and he's got some yellow rim lighting showing up from down here, so I just wanted to give him that across his nose, and also across the top of his lip like that. And I think that's pretty much okay. And I think I also wanted to take this part, I keep coming away from his brow area, and then I look back at it, and I think, and this will happen too, your colors will dry differently, whether it's watercolor or gouache. You know, watercolor tends to dry lighter, gouache tends to dry darker for some colors and lighter for other colors. So your dark colors will dry lighter, your light colors will dry darker. And so you kind of have to get used to that. That's kind of a color shift for lots of mediums. You know, every medium has a little bit of that. Acrylic has the least color shift, I believe, after that oil. And then watercolor and gouache have their own types of color shifts because the water is making it look a little bit different. Okay, so I think I'm going to go ahead with the hair and the eyebrow now. I'm trying to think of what else I could do as far as the shading on the face. I think I'm pretty much done. I think I would like it to be a little bit more perky with that brim lighting, which I don't think it gave me quite the pop I wanted, so maybe I'll just go in with more of a white. I feel like I really want it to look like it's a rim light. There we go. That looks more like a rim light. And over here, the top of his lip, and over here on the bottom of his chin. I really just want that color to dance off the bottom of his chin, like there's a nice highlight there. And whenever you do rim lighting, bounce light of yellow coming here, don't have like another one with green coming on this side of his face. I don't care if there's like a green laser on this side, then just have like the green laser on. Don't have like everything else on too. One rim light and one, you know, you've got contre-jour lighting, backlighting, any of that kind of stuff, then your rim lighting should only be like one main light and one rim light. Don't do like a bazillion different lights. It's going to make it confusing. It's not just to be lazy, it'll just make it confusing. Okay, alright, so I'm going to get the black now. And I think for his hair, we want to mix a very indigo black. So it's kind of difficult because we're already doing an indigo for his actual jacket. So I think that the challenge here is I don't want it to be the exact same color. So let's try to make it more black. I think this is actually a Payne's Gray, or dark Payne's Gray color that I have here. Again, these are the two colors I had left over on here from when I did that goat, I think a year and a half ago or a year ago on Skillshare. Let's not mention Skillshare again. For reasons unknown to, I hope, some of the people out there. But let's see, I've got this black, and let's test it again on here. It's pretty black. I like that color, so I think that's pretty good. It's just got a hint of blue in it. And so I'm going to go ahead and start streaking that into the hair. And what you want to do with hair when you want to create highlights is put in a center line, and then on the sides that you want it to look like it's blending into a highlight, and you blend away. Not as much work for something like this, just a coloring book page, but the concepts are still the same. Come in from this side on the sideburn, and let me know if we drop the stream again somehow.
Yeah, of course.
I think that's really irritating that it dropped it once, but I don't even know reason or such and such reason, but
These are all very interesting questions.
yeah, well, like I said, I think that was the main reason why we stopped doing live streams. Why I didn't like keep them up for a long time is because they were always kind of hard to determine the quality and whether or not it was going to drop it on YouTube. And every other platform is like even worse than YouTube. So I mean, I prefer YouTube, but everything else is even going to be worse. Okay, I'm going to give them a little bit of a highlight up there. Move around to this side. And black actually has the least amount of when you color somebody's hair. And I know that for myself too. Like I've got black hair. If you paint black hair, it's going to have some blue and purple in it. but it's going to have very few other low lights and mid light colors. So it's simpler to paint, but also can look less interesting than if you do a red or a blonde hair. Then you can end up having like all these browns and bronzes and, you know, all these other different colors in there. So I love the way that black hair looks, but it doesn't give you as much opportunity for as many colors in painting. But, you know, it's a gorgeous hair color in real life, of course. And I'm going to give just a little bit more of that highlight down some of those areas, because I just feel like otherwise, what's the point of painting it all one solid mass color? So let's try to make it a little bit variegated. We're going to have to sort of pick and choose these on our own, but you can see what I'm doing here. I sort of do like a stripy stroke, and then do a little bit of feathery off strokes on the side to choose where we're going to separate these trendrils. And just like this person has drawn, so the original artist who did this this coloring book page, they've drawn the hair in like these little clumps, like not every single tendril, but like disparate clumps. That's how you want to draw your hair. That's how your real hair falls, even though your hair is separated. So, you know, a California quail has that beautiful plume on the top of its head on the front there that looks like a little Elvis, you know, pompadour at the front. That's actually 6 individual feathers, but it hangs together in one feather. And so there's a good example of how, you know, something that's disparate feathers looks like it's one feather hanging out there. But that's because that's the nature of how hair works, is that it sort of hangs out in a larger clump with, you know, consisting of the smaller clumps. So from a distance, it'll look like this is a bigger clump, but when you get close up, and as you know your own hair, of course, you know, it's individual strands, but from a distance, it'll look like these clumps that you want to sort of really focus on, not making it every single last bit of hair. And I also remember reading a long time ago that when you draw dry hair, it looks wet, and wet hair looks dry. And by that, I think the implication was you get a lot more hard edges in wet hair, like if somebody's being painted underwater, versus you get more soft edges and blending in hair that's dry. So that's another good tip for when you're painting hair. Okay. Yeah, it's funny. I haven't actually used bad paper in a long time because I actually...
MJ Pete says he's still jealous of your schminky palette. I have a metal palette, but the mixing areas are too deep.
Oh, well, is it 12 wells, or how many number of wells do you have in that palette? Is it a... I don't know what the rest of the palette is like. Just want to know how jealous you should be. But... I think if you have a metal plate, basically, and you can divide it into 12 disparate areas, you can get a pretty close implication of this. But yes, I'm very lucky to have this palette. It's discontinued. I remember when I contacted them about it, they said, well, don't make this anymore, because I saw it in a picture someplace, and I said a few years ago, I would use your paints all the time, you know, could you please send me this palette if you have it? And they said, well, we don't make it anymore. I said, oh, darn. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll just not have this palette. And then they said... it was a really nice lady. She said, I'm going to go check the warehouse for you and get back to you, and let's see if we can have any left over that we didn't sell. And she did find a few, I think 3 or so that she, I think it was actually more like, yeah, I can't remember if it was 2 or 3, but it was more than this one. I think I have at least 2 is what I'm saying. But I think I've shown you another one in that, the tour. But she sent me the 2 that she found, and she sent them all the way from Germany for free. And she didn't even know that I had a YouTube channel. She didn't know that I could say anything, and I never try to use my channel or anything that I'm doing as leverage. Not that it would work. I don't have a very big channel, but it's interesting that they were so nice. They were so nice that they just said, okay, I'll go and look. And without knowing or caring whether or not this would be good for their PR in any way, they sent me these 2 palettes for free. So I will be indebted to them, and also I know for real that they're actually nice people. The Schminka people are actually nice people, because like I said, they got no PR out of it.
Okay, I got a whole host of comments from Graven, who says, Brian Stelfreeze said something along the lines of wet on wet for dry hair, wet on dry for wet.
Yes, that's exactly right. I don't know that person, but I do know those comments. That's exactly what I was told by a teacher when I was... drawing in pencil, in fact, for high school back when I was 14. But they said that. They said draw wet hair like it's dry, and dry hair like it's wet. And that definitely translates into wet and wet and wet on dry for paint.
Kat says, what brush is that white-handled, black, and short bristles?
I showed all of these brushes at the beginning, so if I ever, edit this, you'll see that at the beginning to the end if I reload this, and the stream quality isn't as bad. But this is a 1/8 inch angle brush by Simply Simmons. And you know I love my angles and my flats a lot. And so when I saw a 1/8 angle, like for me at this point, a 1/8 or like, something that's less than a third of an inch angle, I really like it because it helps me cut into areas like this and get a nice point and also a swoop to get that, angle there. And you can see how much I can do just with a cheap paper as long as you've got nice paint and nice, decent brushes. And these brushes aren't expensive. I barely use my Sables anymore, actually. And that's because I have them, but I use them mostly for watercoloring. But for Inktense and Gouache, I tend to use the nylons. And even for watercolor, I use the nylon for the blending. Because it just carries less water over, and therefore causes me less stress with, you don't get a bloom of water. Okay, you're going to leave some room lighting back there at the back of the head.
MJ Pete, finally, he says, 12 Wells, it is a knockoff, but not as good. I use a porcelain palette for watercolors that are not in a regular deep well palette.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, then you're pretty well situated. That's a pretty decent trade for it. I mean, I almost feel like for a lot of these things, sometimes you don't. I've wanted stuff sometimes that I haven't been able to get. Sometimes you just have to find a stand-in for it, right? Because what else can you do? You can't, get it. And so as a result of that, I found that mostly when you find a stand-in, you work hard to get it. It works pretty well. It works as well as the original, as long as you try hard to find something that has some of the same properties. Okay, so I'm going to take my angle again, and I'm following the curve of the hair and melting into these highlights. So going from a harder section in the middle and blending away into the highlights towards the end back there, giving me some nice highlights all along. And any place where I feel like I could have used more of a highlight and it's gone, because this is gouache, I can just come back right here and just with the damp edge of my brush, lift that out. Again, like I was mentioning before, Thomas Blackshear, good person to look into if you want to do a lift out technique exclusively for like your whole painting basically. I've always just done lift out for certain parts, highlights and to correct mistakes and such, but he likes to do it for like almost the whole piece for different areas and just constantly work on it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and soft blend back up to there and soft blend back up to there, and actually feel like I'm going to pick these out a little bit harder to match the right side highlights, and just a little bit more help there to match the weight and balance of the hair on the right side.
MJP wants to know if you've gotten your Rasa easel yet.
No, but I did get a text from Jake, who is the Rasa easel co-creator, and he said that they were going to be ready to ship in 2 weeks. He said that they were finishing ahead of time, and they were going to be doing that. And the one that they sent me for free as a sample, I gave to a friend, the same friend who had foot surgery, so I felt like she would use it and be happier with it. So I haven't had my actual Rasa easel that I got for a few months now. But she has it, and I hope she's using it in good health. But yeah, Jake said that he was going to be sending out those easels in 2 weeks, and I don't know if it's the lockdown or the quarantine is going to change anything for people, because obviously that's going to change a lot of stuff for some of these things. But that's what he had said to me, is that they were actually finishing ahead of time and were going to be ready to ship in a few weeks. So I think they'd actually said that they weren't going to give people these easels till October, but they worked really hard, I think, to get them done early. And if they do get them done early, despite the quarantine, then what will be really nice is that people will get to use them while they're stuck at home, which I think is going to be a great gift. Okay, so I think I'm going to stand up real quick and look at that hair. What do I think about that hair? I think it's pretty good. I like that highlight coming down the center. I think I would probably lift a bit more here to match up the weight and balance of it. A little bit here. Again, don't have to work super hard on this. I'm telling myself that this is just a coloring book page and it's a study. It's not even an original artwork, so no reason to kill myself doing that. Now let's go ahead and throw in his eyebrow. For guys, that's along with the eyelashes, it's where all the drama comes in, because you're not wearing any other kind of ornament, usually, if they're a conventional, you know, old-fashioned male. In the way that they're done, they don't have any makeup, but that's where his drama is coming from, is right here. I'm going to go ahead and actually put some of that black down on his eye as well, just at that top there, to give him a little bit of a darker lash line. And coming around the corner here, giving him a darker lash line coming around the corner, but I think that's good. And then I think I'm going to go ahead and give him a little bit of a flesh on his cheeks, just a bit. And I'm going to try to use a softer brush for that, again, so I don't mess that up. And also not to try to make him look like a pixie with too much of that flush. Tiny bit of magenta there. Okay, that's dirty. That's gotten dirty. It's a dirty color. Pull that out. Let's try that again. A little bit of this white. And a little bit of some magenta. It's a nice pink. I don't know if it's my rinse water that's coming out really dirty, but it's probably because I need to replace this rinse water. Just means if I'm carrying water over, I'm not going to do it with that anymore. Do it from the left side, that's why I have the left side there. Okay, so I've got this, and I'm going to dull this down, or maybe I shouldn't. I'll just add a little bit of it to another area. Right here. So I want to keep that for actually other stuff. And my assumption is that it's not going to, oops, that's a big fleck of unmixed paint. And that's not going to look so good there. It looks like I can already see that he's not really suited to that color. Let's try that. If it doesn't work, I'm just going to lift it out. I'm going to go ahead and lighten that out. Doesn't look like he's going to benefit from that, and so I'll make it lighter. Maybe just a lighter color coming down his cheek. Just want it to look like he's got a little bit of a flush and going up to that area, and then just blend off the edges. Yeah, what I don't like here, and it's been bothering me constantly, is how this paper is peeling up right there because it's a cheap paper. And since I managed to work this paper up earlier, it's got a little bit of a peeling area right there. The only other way I can think of fixing that is by adding some white in to patch it up. And that's what I'm going to do because, like I said, white is my Robitussin cough syrup. I can use it to cure anything. Okay, so let's go ahead and put that in there and that'll solve my problem. There we go. Now he looks like a clean skinned elf, just like we wanted it to be, very not. Because, you know, there's that weird peeling paper. That stupid area right there making him look really, he's got some kind of eczema problem. He's an elf. He's not supposed to have an eczema problem. He's rich enough to take care of it. He's supposed to be a king. Alright, alright, so I think that's taken care of right there. And unless I want to give him more skin issues, I think I better move on. I think that's good. I think he looks good. I think we want to dual tone his vest a little bit. He's got those tattoos on his chest that are supposedly colored black. So I guess we could go ahead and... Remember I told you the theme in the trilogy is that they've got this court and the aesthetic is this Middle Eastern arabesques and sort of, you know, very Persian, you know, Arab type of stuff, and then also mixed with a little bit of a goth flavor with the tattoos. And again, I think that's cute. Do I think it's cultural appropriation? No, that's not such a big deal. There's nothing there that you're disrespecting. Cultural appropriation has to be disrespectful. So if you're doing something that's offending people, you know, then that's cultural appropriation. But just taking some kind of aesthetic from that part of the world and mixing it with some kind of fantasy thing, that's just a human thing to do. I mean, people have been doing that in art for ages. So that's how we get stuff like Art Nouveau and Art Deco, is you mix the East and the West. So some of the most beautiful art forms in the West are a mix of the East and the West. So it's all about respect and intention. I've said that before, and you can go watch that video we did on Henry Justice Ford, and the way that he did his illustrations in the Golden Age, and how even though he painted a lot of people from different cultures, he was very respectful, so therefore it's not cultural appropriation in my mind. And I can say that at least for this culture, because this is my culture. My family's Pakistani and Persian. Okay, alright, so let's see. I've got,
Vaughn says, hi, Hajra, all caps with a heart.
Oh, hi, Vaughn.
And
So
3
good to see you
exclamation
here.
points.
I saw you sharing metallic colors on your channel the other day, and I didn't get a chance to stop and comment, but I did see you were sharing some really pretty colors, and so I thought to myself, that's a really nice thing to see. I didn't know there was all those new other metallics out there, and I already have a lot of metallics that I'm not using, so I decided not to go and, you know, get more of them right now, but... Like I said, I've always tried to limit myself to the one cabinet. I have to use up this cabinet, the tabouret of supplies I have. And I don't ever want it to become like more than that because I don't know that I'd even be able to use them well. You know, I'd get overwhelmed and not be able to find things. Okay, so I added that collar shading, trying to see if there's anything else we want to add here. I like his, you know, sort of smoldering looks that he has there. I think that we could probably make his eye socket and his well a little bit darker. I don't want to do that now with the risk of ruining it, but I do like the rim lighting there. I'm going to go and add a little bit of dual color to the vest here.
Maria Kellner says, hi, Hajra from Sydney, Australia.
Oh, hi. How are you? So glad to see you here, too. Always good to see people who I had as patrons and long-term viewers.
And then Vaughn says, I know, right? I realized the other day that 99% of my inventory will still be here long after I'm gone, LOL.
Oh, don't say that. You know what you should do? Just tuck into it. Use it real fast. Use it for
pour it onto the papers like people are wasting their paints and pouring it out.
No. That's actually, those are called liquid pours, and yeah, I always look at that and say, oh my god, look at all the paint that people are using for abstract pieces. But I mean, you can have a few of those, but I can't imagine using all my paints for just liquid pours like that. But yeah, I think that if you have a lot of stuff, because I mean, I sort of committed myself to that with the stuff that I have too. And as I went through my paper, is I had several classes that I handed people out supplies where I provided the supplies, and I was able to get through a lot of this stuff that I thought I wasn't going to be able to get through fast enough. So, you know, teach a few classes maybe, or, you know, go to a school and do a free demo, you know, and of course you're not going to be able to do that now under lockdown, but, you know, eventually at some point you could do that. And, you know, it's just different ways of getting through your supplies is what I found, and I also just try not to... I haven't bought any more new stuff. I've bought it very slowly. Like, I get, like, one new thing a year or something like that. So that way it doesn't pile up. I think I like the shadows everywhere. I think I'm happy with the pickouts that I did over there. Over here, I can see that there's a little bit of a color that maybe we want to differentiate with a secondary color here. So I will go ahead and pop in a little bit of dark there. Same thing for this rim on the collar here. You know, these are all little details that you can work on. You know, you don't have to necessarily... see me do them for the smaller ones. I might skip some of the smaller ones, especially as I'm streaming, because the last thing you want to do is be streaming that stuff and, you know, stop seeing the forest for the trees because there's people watching and they want to see you do the rest of the page. So, but I love those little details. I might come back and work on some of them for fine-tuning the vest. And let's move on to this next person here. And she's got a costume that has skin color showing through this this dress, which is like some kind of lacy type thing. And so I'm thinking if I should do her first or maybe I should do her first, because she's got, I think she would have like a red dress based off of the character. So is there a vote for who I should do next?
Sure, why don't you like describe them rather than her and her.
Okay, alright. So she's got reddish,
right?
Yeah, so she's got reddish hair and she's gonna have a purple dress or a dark purple dress. She has a red dress and blonde hair. These two are soldiers, so they're very much in the same color and color scheme as him. I think they're like his cousins or relatives, so they've got the same outfit color and the same hair color. She's got black hair and like a light lavender outfit, and so you know, who do you want me to do first? And the background, of course, is going to be like all sorts of purple Art Nouveau-ish type of smoky gems and, you know, dark crystal type of looking stuff. So is there a preference?
And Pete says red and blonde first. Kat says red.
Okay, so her. And anybody
Heather
else?
Bryant says he has a come hither look in his eyes.
He does indeed. I think she drew sort of all of the guys that way.
So I think the red one.
The red one, okay. Unless there's any other votes, but you'd have to go for two at least for.
Vaughn says red hair and purple dress. Heather Bryant says red and blonde. So I think the majority is going for the red and blonde.
Okay, red and blonde. Okay, and then this is the one with the ginger hair and the purple dress. So there was one vote for her.
Yes.
So yeah, so we'll go for her then first, and then that way we can dig into
the
some
one
juicy...
vote was Vaughn. And you know how much you like Vaughn.
I do love Vaughn, so maybe Vaughn's vote counts for a few votes. We have to see. We'll definitely do her second. How's that? So we've got a few votes for that, and so we'll do that first. So, and I'll try to go faster through this. So let's see, I'm trying to think of, okay, so first of all, the first gap I see here is that we skipped some of her skin, and she's got skin that is over here on her shoulder on both sides, and she's also got rim lighting, so what we're gonna do is, oh no, I ran out of my skin color.
Oh no.
No, oh, it's okay, I'll just add some more here. A little bit of that, a little bit of the red, brownish red, and what do I add to the brownish red? Do you remember? Remember?
White gel pen.
White, it's not gel pen, it's white gouache. Gel pen, that's not gonna work. Okay, so go ahead and put that in, and I'm gonna put the rest of it over here in case I need it. But yeah, that is white gouache. It's not waterproof. If it's waterproof, then it's white ink or white acrylic, and if it's not waterproof, then it is gouache. So we're gonna mix more of the skin color here. Mix, and it's still not light enough. It's getting there. So I'm gonna pick up some more of that from over here. Now you can do that in two ways. You can rinse your brush out, or you can just get your other brush over here so that you don't contaminate and don't also rinse out, and then mix into here. And I think that'll do it. And what I'll also do, so I don't waste the white that I have on this brush, is mix that into here too. And that way I can use this first. Actually now I've got like peach paint everywhere, so I'm gonna have to rinse one of those out at some point. Let's start with this one. Yeah, so that's it's a pretty close color to that. It's a little bit redder. I don't know where, I think what ended up happening was I used more red than I did for over there, so let me just get a tad bit of brown. Again, this is your color mixing part of it. It's like measuring, and that is pretty close. It's a little bit more red. I can see it's a little bit more red, but I don't mind so much. I'm going to go ahead and dilute it, and then just use it, and then I'm going to come back around and adjust it later. And it's all right. It's all right if it's a little bit like that color, so I think the other thing I'm going to do is, you guys know I tend not to waste the paint on my brush. It's just an old habit I have from having expensive brushes and not having, a huge amount of funds earlier when I first started painting to get more supplies. And so as a result of that, I usually end up painting with like multiple brushes in my hand, a few with the paint on them and then one that I do the shading with. So that's what I'm doing here, and I'm going to go ahead and lift out now this part of it with a little bit of that rinsed off part and straighten out to the shoulder part, because the shoulder's got rim lighting on it. That's what's going on there. And now while it's a little bit dryish, we can push a little bit of that back there, and it gives us that nice rim lighting effect without actually eating up the whole part of it. And so same thing for over here. Leave that shoulder back there with a little bit of the rim light, come forward here, and it's got a little bit of more of a highlight down here, and I think it goes probably down to right here is all skin. So this is all skin right here, so I just want to make sure we have that as skin. And it is a little bit pinker than what's on her face, but I can alleviate that by making that skin on the face a bit more pink later on. And it's not such a big deal. I mean, the other way to do it is, of course, is to go back, and I'm going to just use up this paint that's on my brush right here, because I see that this person also has shoulders that are showing. And go ahead and just rim light that and put that down as here. And also on this side, here. And so if you've got this kind of cheap paper from a coloring book, again, please do not use really wet watercolor. And probably avoid ink as well, and use a dry gouache or use your color pencil or marker. I'm using gouache because I'm not a color pencil or marker person, and that'll work fine as long as you don't. And I'm going to go ahead and just add a little bit of water to that because I want it to be shaded. And again, you can come back and make all of this darker, so I can actually the whole thing dark, and then come back in with the juggling 3 brushes at this point and make that skin darker. I actually like that redder skin better. I think it's a prettier skin color. It's got a little bit more of a flesh to it, so maybe we'll keep that for the girls especially. I don't think there's any other skin that I'm missing getting on, so I think I'm going to have to rinse these brushes out finally. Rinse, rinse, rinse. And rinse for that one. And rinse for this one. I've got some really dark muddy water back there, but that's why I've got 2 wells, because this is my rinsing water and the other one is my painting water. I can actually continue to use that without changing it as long as I don't dip into the other one. Okay, so now we're going to go for the red dress on this. And let's start right in with the nice brush here. That's the softest one, so I think I'm gonna go for red. And she's got a bit more of a like a cranberry wine color dress, I think, in the actual thing. So what we're gonna do is mix the flush over there. So I don't want to put that over here. This is where the skin color is. We'll just start a new well all the way over here. And let's add, what would I add to that to make it a garnet or cranberry color? Can you tell me? Can anybody say any? Does anybody know? What would I do to make this cooler?
Answer yet.
If I wanted to make this red, which is a primary red, a little bit cooler, what would I add to it?
White gouache pen.
No. What side of the color wheel, if you have red here, so this still has some of the staining here, what's going in this direction to make it
blue?
Cool? Right.
Everybody's saying blue now.
Yeah, so blue.
Some people are saying it so fast they're not even spelling it properly.
Right. So it is blue or purple that you'd add to make this cooler. So I think that's probably too much blue, too much purple. But yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and throw that in there, and look at that beautiful cool red, like the kind you have from cherry or pomegranate. That's the kind of color you end up with. And I'm going to go ahead and color that in. And it's because I have a delay for the response, and I'm not patient enough to wait, because I'm like thinking to myself, if I wait, people will leave. But yeah, I should just wait in the future. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing I did with the outfit over here, which is I'm going to do the base color first. But you can see how that's gotten cooler and more towards a cherry color. So if I wanted to warm it up, I would have added a yellow to it, or a color with yellow in it, like orange. And if I wanted to cool it down, I'd add purple or blue to it. Now, you want to make sure that if you want to have clean colors, that you don't add a color. When I added a purple, it should be a purple that is very warm. So if I added a, in order to keep it closer to red, the cooler the purple is, the more it'll go towards blue. So if that doesn't make any sense to you, then you need to be taking that color theory class with me. It's not easy to explain immediately, but one of these days I need to bring out, we'll do another video that's for free that has more color stuff in it. But, okay, so I'm going down the side here, and I've gotten this, and it's going to dry mostly even. It's going to dry a little bit with a little bit of texture in it as a result of it being, what's that called? The paper being crappy. So it's just make sure you understand that it's not going to. And I'm also going to try to do the gradient to start with. So I'm actually going to start up here, and in this case, instead of doing a flat or doing the flat, let's just shade this in sections. So we'll do the entire dress in one pass instead of coming back with the glaze. So let's put this down, because that's what I realized, because this is kind of a see-through dress, and his outfit is very opaque. So I think there's a different way to handle how I want to do this versus how I did the other one. So let's try to make this opaque and transparent at the same time so we can get that effect. So, and that would require me to do these glazes and then do the shading. So here's at her neck area, and of course her neck is a round cylinder, so the edges would be dark, and then coming toward the center it would be rising up like a cylinder, and so you have the highlight in the center there, okay? And going on to the next section, if we're going to ignore, well, this part is kind of complicated because it's got like a necklace above and below it, so she's wearing a lot of jewelry, but we're going to apply the same principle, which is that these edge parts are going to be a little bit darker, and then the part in the middle is going to be lighter, okay? So we go ahead and blend towards the center, like this, and perk any color up if it dies. So if that color back there is blended too much.
JP wants to know, will the jewels be yellow?
The jewels will indeed be yellowish gold, yeah. I'm going to do a nice gold finish on them to match everybody's jewels. Hers and the few that she's wearing and the ones that she's wearing are going to be gold. Her necklace is going to be red because she's wearing some kind of magic red necklace in the story. So, again, if you read that book, you would know, but I wouldn't necessarily wholeheartly recommend it. I don't think the writing is that great. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do these wrinkles. There's a lot of wrinkles here, and we can lift the highlights in from them individually, but this is what I'm going to do because this is gouache and it's easier to do it this way, is we're going to follow the major shading first, which is darker at the top and fading. What happens with a woman's chest, right? It comes out. So this is going to be darker at the top and then fade towards lighter as it heads towards that center part. So let's do that major, okay? That's your major takeaway shading first, and then go, just like with shapes when you're drawing, even with shading, you want to go from large to small. Because if I focus on the smaller amounts of shading and I lose the forest for the trees, then I'm going to have to come back and very minutely and with a lot of pain try to pick out the larger shading on top of the smaller shading. So better for me to do the larger shading first, the major shading in the area, and then come back and do the smaller shading. And that's, you would do it the exact same ways or you'd be doing your drawing. So now I'm going to go ahead and shade down here. Again, this is going to give this a look of a transparent type of dress as a result of having this shading. You know, like she's wearing something that's a sheer georgette or silk or something, you know? So you're going to give it that, and so it's shaded dark from up there and fading towards light. And then now I can streak in to those areas that I feel like there's those folds, and then I'm going to lift the highlights, and this is me now going to the smaller shading and lifting out the areas of folds there to get the smaller shading. And you're not going to have, again, a huge amount of detail that you're going to be able to work out on a coloring book page. This is not where you're going to sit here and perfect your fabric fold shading, okay? Because this is not good paper, and it's a very busy, smaller composition, but you can work out some of it that way. And so we've got that, and if I have any area where I feel like it lifted too much or went beyond the area that I wanted it to go, then I'm going to come back in and add a little bit more red there. So went into a little bit of her hair tendril, so I'm going to go ahead and lift that, and that'll lift just fine because, again, it's gouache. Okay, so that's that. I'm going to perk up the color a bit more around that area because I do feel like it sort of dried a little bit of the water shading. It got a little bit lighter, so just perking up the edge corner here. Usually it's the edge where you have the water gradient meeting the rest of the color that goes lighter, and it's that area that you need to go ahead and spruce back up. I don't know, wipe that off my brush. I just got some paint on my brush and don't want to track that around. And now go ahead and blend that edge. And the other nice thing about gouache is, unlike acrylic, and that would go for acrylic gouache or any of that stuff, is you don't have like a time limit. You know, you don't have to say, oh my god, get to this fast, otherwise it'll dry. And then the next thing you know, you can't do anything with it because it's dry. And then you can go back over it and layer over it, of course, to credit.
Vaughn says, oh, how pretty.
Oh, thank you, Vaughn. Alright, so that's that part of it, and so that's just shading there. And now we're going to continue to do the same thing. And so how would we imagine that this is coming down and doing that? It would be the same way. We'd have the darker edges coming out from the outside. And let's try to, for down here where I did a solid color, let's go ahead and lift the wrinkle highlights. So wrinkle highlight, pick out right there. I'm picking that out right there. Just a straight line. And you can apply these same rules with better success to your original drawing on a watercolor paper, because the paper will be nicer. But I'm just trying to do this stuff that I see here. And it doesn't matter if I have no, you know, reference for that part of it, for the details and the wrinkles or anything like that. It's just something that I can play with as a result of having painted a lot of fabric, right? It's just like we were doing for the muha pieces, is that you can come up with these as a detail. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to streak in. You sort of have to use your imagination. If it looks good, you know, you've done it a few times, you get an idea of what a fold would look like, and you just want the highlights of the folds. It's all very simple. This is not like a complicated situation here. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and say that I want to say start from like right, let's say right here. I'm just going to draw that in, that she has a non-sheer area to make this a PG outfit. And hold on, let me, and lift out that part that I dropped in her hair, and it'd come down from this part and I think go to like right over. So I'm just giving her, you know, if you're a girl and you've worn these dresses, you know you have like an underdress or something that you wear under it, like a shift, or it goes there, it's a different color. And do the same thing on this side. See, I think that would probably drop off at a lower angle there, so let it go down that way. And then on this side, I'd say I'd measure it right from the center here, going up. Now remember, this is the center of her body line. So if I was going to cut across the center there, it would be probably around right, to match the top of that, like right here. So again, I'm just trying to drawing with my paint here to try to figure out where that's going to be. And bear with me, this is the ugly stage of that part of it. And I'm going to now shade that dark and then shade to light as it comes down here, and then do the same thing with the wrinkles going up. So then you have the lightest area in the center there. I have to mix some more of that cranberry color though. The good thing is I'm using up these paints that are left over on this palette so I can get new paints out. The bad news is I might run out and have to get out new paints, and then there will be more leftover paints on this palette. So hopefully we can work it in the middle. Well, I did say that if I ran out, that I'm going to use the art graphs, because I have not used the art graphs yet, and I want to actually see how they work in comparison on a piece that I'm working on with the Creative Colors as well. Okay, so I mixed a little bit more of that. Might end up losing just about all of this color just to this red dress. So I'm going to have to probably come back with other...
Vaughn says, I have such a hard time getting lost in lines like this, putting colors in the wrong spot.
Putting colors in the wrong spot? Mm-hmm. Oh, you mean like there's so many lines in this piece? Yeah, there's a ton of lines on this piece, that's for sure. I think that's one of the reasons why I prefer my own drawings for a lot of stuff, is they can get as complicated as they want over time, but they're not as you know, there's a lot of tendrils in this, and so I mean it'll help if you have a piece that's not as ink heavy, you know. Okay, so let's see, I've got this, and I'm going to try to shade down in this direction, and this paper is not taking the paint the way I want it to take, so now I'm trying to fight against it just a bit. Fighting the paper. This is something that happens a lot on my channel. Don't worry, I'm only going to be doing 1 or 2 pages from this coloring book, and the rest of it's already been recycled, so no fighting bad paper for long. I just felt like, since I had this coloring book, that I might as well at least try to do a few pages out of it before it left, because otherwise it just feels wasteful. And would have donated it, like I said earlier, except for that we were on lockdown, so I can't go out and donate it to like a school. Okay, so you can see how I'm shading down from that to give it so that she's got a bodice effect there. So just trying to give that a little bit of a bodice effect there so that it matches what you would see in, like, say if you're painting this dress for real. And the paint really isn't sitting the way that you want it to, so I'm getting the effect I want, but with fighting. So it's just let me fight the paper a bit. You can watch me do that. Like, whenever time I see somebody struggle when they're painting, part of me is really pained for them. Like, I'm like, oh my god, they're gonna mess up on there, and then the other part of it's like, let's see what happens. So I don't know. So I don't know which part of it you guys are on, but there's definitely a part of me that's like, yeah, let's see if this person's gonna mess this up. At least it's not my stuff. But then you're always like, no, I want them to totally win. So I always am happy when somebody does something difficult and wins. But there's definitely a part of you that's sitting there saying, I get to watch this result live and see what happens. But I think I told you about that one person I saw cutting an X-Acto knife really hard on something, and then it broke off the tip and it flew into their eye. Well, at least according to them, that was the most painful live thing that I can't even remember if it actually was live. Now that I think about it, I don't want to lie. Maybe it's just a story that in my mind feels like it was live that somebody shared online. But I think it might have been, actually. I think it was either in a class at AU or somebody shared it online.
You're freaking out, Vaughn, so maybe talk about something else. Joyce says staying in from St. Louis.
Oh, that's great. We're staying in Santa Cruz.
And then Kat says, if you were doing this on good paper, which who knows, Kat, would it be quicker?
Yeah. You remember how fast that bear came together, Kat? That paper, that was Arch's paper that you know, when we were talking and I was doing that data viz bear. It would be a bit faster, but this isn't my drawing, so there's the other fact of it that slows you down. You sort of have to, I haven't done some of the planning for this, right, ahead of time. So this is somebody else's, so I have to sort of make those decisions as I'm doing this. So as a result of that, it's a little bit slower, and also it's super busy. So, you know, usually if you got a super busy piece, it gets slower, right? So this is a very busy piece. Okay, so I'm going to stand up real quick and see if I got the shading there like I want. I think I would like it to come down from here to here. Also, that part should be covered. Get a bit darker, shade down. Okay, and this part in the center here should stay light. Okay, I think that's good for now. Yeah, it's always good to take your time with stuff, because you take your time and, you know, you can always, you know, come back and say you want to spend less time, but you rush through it, and sometimes you work hard on something and it's, you know, not what you wanted it to be, but a part of that is that you rushed through it. So I think even with something like this, I learned this a long time ago. It's been sort of something that I've tried to do with a lot of my art, is that even if something is not like, if it's just a study even, you know, like this, and it's not something that's my own art, but I'm doing a rendition of somebody else's work as a study, just give it your best, you know? Don't ever waste a subject. Don't ever waste an opportunity to learn and give something your best, you know, within a reasonable amount of time. You know, I'm not saying that you have to sit here and do this forever, but, you know, give it a few hours at least. If it's a complicated piece like this, if you're spending, you know, like way less time than that, like if you spent like 30 minutes on this, then I'd really have to ask you, how did you get through this entire piece in 30 minutes, you know? So it's just not going to be possible if you're, regardless of your medium and regardless of your paper. So this is going to take at least a few hours, if not longer, depending on if you drew it from scratch. Then it's probably going to take, for me, it takes me like a few days to do the layout and planning and composition and color, and then another day or two to do the artwork painting. And so all of that stuff is relative. It's relative to the size of the artwork, but also how much I want to get out of the finished result, you know? But definitely more time is better than less time. You can always decide to go a bit faster, but if you rush through something, it's probably not going to be the result that you want. Okay, so shading down from there. And I just wanted to give her this nice gossamer sort of like translucent effect from some of this stuff, and coming down to the top of that and do the same thing in between these. Now you could also paint right over this jewelry and then come back and paint over the top of it. I'm not having so much trouble painting past it, but if I was, I would paint right over it. Okay, so I think we've only got a little bit of that left on this side. There's some hair and some more jewelry.
Here's some more comments. Akraf Abasadia says, did she draw the line art?
Not this time. So usually I do. Usually I do my own line art or my own studies for stuff. In this case, in order to get the stream started faster, I'm using a page from a book. But yeah, I typically like to do my own line art, but not this time around.
And they also said that they love the art style.
Yeah, this is a really lovely, like Kat was saying earlier, definitely Art Nouveau inspired art style here. And also kind of semi-anime. And I'm not really an anime person, but I know a lot of people like anime. But it's not fully anime, but it's like semi-anime inspired. But I definitely like the Art Nouveau aesthetic of this whole thing. With all the swirls and arabesques and detailing, you know, all the organic curves and everything. I love that.
Kat says, ah yes, I feel like I slapped my pics together too fast and voila, it is what it is, with laughing faces.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's basically, she and I were thinking of the same thing, because that's basically what I was saying when I was saying, like, you know, you don't want to work too fast. You want to go slower and take your time and make sure you do justice to a piece instead of just rushing through it. You know, don't ever waste a subject, even if it's just a study. So I think that's what I want to do with the dress. I don't know if everybody else is okay with the detail work here, but I think I'll go in and add a few more darker lines for the wrinkles in some of these areas. And so just like I had highlights in the center of the fold, I'm going to go back and add a little bit more dark around the outside of the folds here, so to perk that up.
And Vaughn said, excellent advice, Hajra, and Joyce said that they loved your video tour.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, I just did that recently.
And MJ Pete wants to know who's reading your chat.
Elijah is reading my chat. Elijah Meeks, my husband.
Some rando.
Some random person that broke into my house. Help! No, it's my husband. He's been around for more than a decade. Alright, so let's see. We've got that wrinkle lifting out here. And again, just picking this out with the gouache here, because that's one of the great things. You could not do this with acrylic, and you could not do this with staining watercolor, and you could do it with oil while it was wet, but then you'd have all the fumes to contend with. And of course, if you were painting with oil on a paper like this, you'd have to prime it all with clear gesso and everything. So, all right. So I think that's basically what I want to do with the dress here, and I think I will get to the hair. And we didn't run out of the red here. I'm really looking forward to coloring her lips the same color and giving her some vibrant lips there because she can match that to her dress. So let's do the, yeah, let's maybe do the face first so we can get that exciting part of it in. And I'll switch to a smaller brush for that part of it. So let's see. Again, there's going to be a limited amount of detail that I can do on a piece like this, but I will start by coloring the edges there. So she looks like she's got a Charlie Chaplin-ish type mustache right on top of her lips, but we're going to fade toward the center. Darker corners. Like that. So again, from the drawing class that I'll be doing the week after next, your top lip, right, like I've drawn here, it's got 3 sections, and the bottom lip has 2 sections. And depending on the type of lip you have, you'll have more or less prominent. So myself, I've got a pretty full lip, and so it depends on, you know, and I also have a sharp bow. So it depends on, you know, some people might have a not much of a bow, or a thinner lip, or a thinner bottom lip, but these 5 sections are always going to be there. So over here, you're going to have shading in the corners. You're also going to have shading around this area to make this part look like it's that separate, disparate part. Sometimes, depending on how much of fat is covering this part will be more prominent. You might have some shading there. And otherwise, you have the corner there, and also shading underneath it, and also shading up here to make that little cleft that goes above your lip. So those are all things that we see in a larger painting. How much we can do in this one, because this is a coloring book, is dependent on, you know, the amount of space that's workable with here. But I will try to make an effort to put some of that shading in, you know, just because, again, it's worth it. So I think in this case, the easiest thing to do is do the pick out method, just like we did with his jacket and, you know, the highlights here, because it's gouache and it's a small area. So let's go ahead and paint it all, because I did try to fade it to the lighter just a little while ago, and it didn't really impress me. So I'm going to go and try it this way now, where I'm going to go ahead and do it all as a fill. And when it comes to the bottom lip, let's see if I can still make the shading work. If it doesn't, I'll do the same color fill that I was talking about. Yeah, see, I feel like the shading on this paper, the gradient, doesn't really work well. So I think the pick out is the best way to go. So let's go ahead and color the whole thing up, and then pick out as soon as it's dry. So right now it just looks like she's got big old clown lips. And color the same color. And now I'm going to come back in with my spotter brush, rinse it out, dab it off on the towel. And now around that area, remember I was showing that area at the top there? So first let's pick out a little bit of the highlight on the bottom lip. Make it in a semicircle, crescent of highlight going out.
Gilders Levy says, I like the work on the dress very much. I think you found all the parts of the dress showing in the drawing. Yay!
Yeah, no, like I said, I try not to waste a subject. Now, it's difficult for a piece like this where, again, you've got very limited paper capacity, and also, it's like I said, not... Okay, so I'm getting the center of that little dimple, and then also I'm going to try to get the other sides of it. Now, I'm kind of inventing this, because again, like I said, it's a rather small thing, but I just know that these things happen to exist, so I'm going to try and shade for them, and do that pick out technique as a result, and it'll give me a little bit of that, and blend towards the corners there. And see, that's pretty effective in giving me a realistic lip on a piece like this. Okay. So I've got that, and I think I'm going to come back in and actually shade a little bit darker parts. Just in the corners there. Very soft. The lift out blends are always very soft. So that's a nice thing about it, is that it gives you a nice soft blend. That's why it's effective for oil painters and such too, you know, really nice soft effect. And let's try to make this a little bit more of a shadow right underneath that area. So it looks like there's a separation of the top and bottom lip a little bit. And come back out with that pick out and like a C shape again, hard to battle with this paper. Again, this is one of the reasons why I don't use bad paper very much anymore. That's because it's kind of difficult to fight with that. There you go. I'm happy with that. See how it gives me that volume back with her lips, you know? Gives you that volume back. Okay, alright, so that's good. And the edges, of course, of her lips are also softer. So I'm going to come back in just with the very edge of that and chisel away. Just the teeniest bit. You'd see this in person if you saw this up close, is that you don't want to have look like it's just a clown painted lip right there. Okay, so there we go. That's that part of it. Now on to the shading for the rest of the face, and then we'll do the hair. Okay. And I think the major difference between doing it on nice paper versus bad paper is I'm using the same nice paints that I have, is that the actual result of the paint would look much nicer on nicer paper. It sits much smoother, right? So you're going to have like a much smoother finish. Okay, so I'm trying to figure out if I want to use this brush or this brush for the shading. I think I'll use this brush. Okay, so I think I had this color as the shading color. And I think with the girls, I wanted to do this color mixed with a little bit of the, making it a little bit rosier. So just transfer some of that over and add a little bit of that pink to it. So it gives me a pinker. Okay, so now let's see if I like that color as a shadow color on the skin. It's kind of lost the contrast, so let's add a little bit more brown to it. That's probably why I made it more brown to begin with, is because as soon as you start to make it too pink, it sort of loses its oomph as a contrast color, you know? So I need to make that more brownish. So let's see if I can figure out what I want to do for that. Let's see. Okay, let's see. Problem with, you know, messing around with the shadow color too much is that you have the risk of, if you use it in too large a space, the skin ends up looking muddy, you know? So just have to be careful about that. Okay, so the skin over here, I'm going to do that and then come back in and give her a rimlet shoulder. So as a result of that, we're going to...
Joyce says she's always wowed by your use of two brushes at once.
Oh, yeah, a technique developed so I wouldn't waste my paint.
And Vaughn says paper can often make or break our results.
Yeah,
which
that's
I think is a funny
true.
thing to say to you.
Yeah. I have nice paper and I use it, but I just don't use it for live streams sometimes. Well, it's just like I had to get started fast, and so like if I had done my own drawing, then of course it would have been on nice paper. I actually, like I said, used up all of my poor quality paper on classes and you know, fast demos and stuff. So I actually don't have very much bad paper left. So, and I did promise that I was going to start using my hot press and not just my cold press, because I was really saving my hot press because it's my favorite paper. But I'm going to really start to use that hot press now as well. Okay, so there we go. And then now for the neck, you know, you've got a shadow under the neck because it's being cast on to the neck from the head. And then you've got a shadow on this side being cast from the hair. And then you've got a shadow on this side from these tendons, and they're drawn right in. So you know exactly, actually, where you're going to be putting those shadows as a result of that. It's very helpful when you do that yourself, or if somebody else does it for you, you know, the taking the time to do the line drawing in such a way that you know where things are going to go. Okay, and I think I'd bring that shadow down a bit more, like down to the Adam's apple area, to imply an Adam's apple, just like that. And she's a girl, so she doesn't have like a giant Adam's apple. That's why I'm not giving it a highlight in the middle, but I'm just bringing it down so you can see that cord in the neck where that would be. Okay, and then so on this side of the face, I want some rim lighting, just like we had some rim lighting going on over here. So let's try to start the darker color further off from the actual edge of the face to right here, and going up to there and going right past the temple like that, and washing my brush off, make sure it's just damp.
Vaughn said she's impressed that these brushes in use today aren't broken in half.
Those are only my Inktense brushes, Vaughn.
It's all the brush she can afford, Vaughn. Little nibbled on brushes.
Those are my travel brushes, and I broke them so they can, fit into the travel set. And now when I brought them back home from the ones that I'm no longer using as travel brushes, they stand out because I know that they're my Inktense brushes. So yeah, the rest of my brushes that are in the other two sections, if you watch the tour, right, the little supplies tour that I did a week or so ago, they are not all split into pieces. But yes, definitely what you guys have seen on YouTube, most of that stuff has been. Okay, so I'm adding a little bit of her eye socket here and coming off, bounce light off the cheek and that shadow area. And again, going to interpret it based off of the line drawing and how we're lighting the rest of the piece. And I did say that that this is one of the few pieces that this person did for the coloring book that actually has a digital colored version, so you can use that as a reference. And of course, me using too much water there is picking up the shading, the actual paint over there. So I've got to come back here and try to smooth that out first because I've gone and lifted out too much. That's the problem with gouache, is if you really get too carried away with some parts of it, that if you add a little bit too much water, it starts to lift off just like that. But the trick is to sort of let it settle and then come back in and do what you want with the shaded part. And add some white to calm it down. Again, white is the robotism of gouache, so you can use it to calm stuff down. Okay, so I think that part of the cheek is about as shaded as I want it.
Joy says she has almost a whole pad of Arches hot press but cannot paint with it.
Oh, well, I felt that way for a few years and then eventually did end up using the Arches. I think I had it for, I'd say, probably 3 years before I used it, but I did get it like when I was 23 and then was too scared to use it. And then I used a few pieces and then I felt like I didn't know what I was doing with my watercolors, and so I didn't. And then when I switched to cheaper paper, unfortunately, it doesn't help you learn how to paint on the Arches because the Arches behaves differently. And so you just sort of have to bite the bullet at some point and say, okay, I am going to paint with the expensive paper because otherwise I won't ever learn how to paint on it. And so I think it's just a personal thing for each time. Like you are going to have to personally learn how to paint with it. It's going to be a personal journey. No amount of watching videos on how to paint with it is going to help with that, because that's still not you using it and you understanding how it's done. So in order to do that, it's very important that you still actually, that you do actually get to it at some point. Okay, so I've got that shading across that part of it that I'm happy with. Pick out that eye area. And I do think there's actually a shadow coming down this side that I would want to light on, like there should be a shadow here on this side of the nose and coming down underneath the nose and then going back up to this side. And the dip on top of the cleft there. And you can come back and make any of these ink lines, the ones that are in the original, you can make them darker if they end up fading underneath the gouache, because they will. And I've got that. I think I'm okay with this part of it. I think I can add, just intuitively, a little bit of shading under the lip there.
Joy said, I agree, but now it is cold press all the way.
Oh, so she likes cold press better? Yeah. Well, cold press is definitely easier to work with. And I like the ease of cold press myself as well. I mean, if you recommend it to any student or they're working with it, cold press is super easy to work with. Hot press is definitely more of an acquired flavor because it's just less forgiving, right? Because you've got the texture is very, very smooth, and so it absorbs paint differently and it's a little bit less forgiving. But you can, indeed, paint with it just as well, if not better. I think for detailed, smooth pieces, it's great, but definitely something you have to work with. Okay, so I'm adding the shading up there. Coming around the eye socket. So if you had this drawing again, you'd have this part of the eye socket is with the lid and the skin hanging over it. This part would be the lightest, and those two would be darker on the two sides because this part would be coming up through the center. So that is what I'm going to try to do right here. That's what I'm doing right here. And I think I can bring this part of the socket shadow up further actually. Yeah, usually when I do a study, I do it on watercolor paper because I've drawn the study from scratch. In this case, because I'm using this page from that book, the paper is bad, but it saved me the time of, like, before the stream to have to do it myself. But yes, definitely a better idea if you want to have better paper. Okay, so, and I'd like this to be a sort of cleaner gradient. I don't know if I can work with that based off of the quality of this paper, but we'll see. Okay, again, just like over here, shadow from where his hairline was. In fact, it's died down a bit. I'm going to darken up down there. But you see how he's got that shadow and all that coming down from where the hair was lying there? We're going to do the same thing over here. So how would this hair that's sitting over there cast a shadow? Sort of follow it around her head in a, you know, her head, of course, is a round shape, a spherical shape, so you'd see how would you light a cube, and then if you put a shadow over it, if you put like a little cowl over a sphere, it would cast a shadow over it, you know, going around and falling off along the edges in that way. So that's exactly how we're going to be lighting this part of it. And for a cheap paper like this, it's almost better not to come around and blend, you know, so just to have the hard edge there and leave it hard edged, it's almost cleaner. Because when you come back and play with it too much, it on this cheap paper, it lifts a little bit too much. So it just depends. Okay, so now I'm going to follow the cheek here. So I can see that there's a taper for the cheekbone. Come back around and come down here. And go down to the jawline. And slowly taper into that rim lighting there, which will meld into the rest of the chin there. Okay, so that's the way that we're lighting her face. And down here, up here, we have the same eye socket situation, right? So come back in, and that fold of skin that I'm imagining in my head that is coming out in the center, and you can just look at your own eye in the mirror and you'll see that. It's blended towards the center there. And I do feel like over here, I kind of lost that highlight in the center there. Maybe it's a result of that paper being wetter when I blended it. I'm going to try to get it back. Not bothering the paper too much, because again, this paper doesn't like to be bothered. And then come back underneath this eye and get that part of the eye shaded that's heading off in that direction and hooking up with the cheek over there. Okay, and there we go. That's that part of it, and very, very simple as far as following the lines here, because they've given the picture is giving me a lot of help. Now up here, when I connect this to the hairline here and sort of taper off in the center where that meets over there. Okay, so I think that's good for the lighting on the skin here. So you can see it's matching how we were lighting everybody here, right? We don't want to light this differently for one person and then light it. It's not going to look like it's the same piece. It's going to look like we've gone and jumbled different pieces together. So I'm going to use a smaller spotter to lift out a little bit of the highlight along the nose here. Now I'm actually going to come back in and add the highlight colors and then the darker colors. And then I think we're going to be pretty much done with that except for the hair and the jewelry. So then we can get to the hair and the jewelry. And let's get to trying to figure out which one I want to do next. Do I want to do the darker shading? Yeah, I think I'll do the darker skin shading first. So let's start with, I think she only has a few areas where I really want to do a little bit of darker skin shading. And I think I'd make it a bronzy color because that's going to be the low light on her actual hair. And also for her eyebrows. So let's try to mix a bronzy brownish red. And I don't know that this is the right color to do that because I've just got a red and a brown here. I want it to go more towards, so what's the opposite of red? Green. And what's the opposite of orange? Blue. So I can add some blue in that to make that a duller brown. So I can come over here where I had the brownish color and make a little bit of a dullish brown right there. And I think that's probably what I'd want for her hair and her eyebrows, I mean. Her eyebrows and her eyelashes and such. So let's try to do that.
Joy said, this is beautiful, amazing working in such tiny spaces.
Yeah, as long as your work wet on dry, then you can have more control and do that. And thanks so much. Thanks so much for appreciating me streaming here. How many people do we have right now anyway?
20.
Oh, that's good. That's not bad. Given that I didn't tell anybody anything on Instagram or anything like that. Okay, so I've got that. I've added a little bit of that shaggy part to the beginning of her eyebrow. You get when your hair right at the beginning of your eyebrow stands up a bit. And same thing we'll do for this eyebrow. Now if you were doing this closer, you'd want to do this in streaky strokes, right? So the eyebrow would have a streaky tapered front part and then back there, and then do a shadow under it again to taper it. You don't want it to just end up looking like you have a hard line there, okay? And I've said this to people before, which is like whether you draw it on in real life or draw it onto paper, both times it looks too severe. So it's a natural soft taper that makes a human eyebrow look, even a dramatic brow has to have, if it's natural, has that taper. So you're not painting it on like you would do a painted on brow, you're doing a tapered brow. Okay, so now I'm going to come back in and give her a little bit of that shading. First down there to add a little bit of weight to the bottom of her eyeball, pushing at that part of the skin, and then coming around here. Luckily the artist has already put all this in, you know, the coloring book page already had that. But if I drew it, then I would have drawn it just a bit softer, because it would try to make it more real. But I'm going to go ahead and put the cut crease in the natural crease that's happening in the double eyelid right there. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And it's missing on this side in the drawing, but I'm going to go ahead and put it on this side anyway. And taper it down. It's probably more hidden on this side at the angle, but I'm going to put in a little bit of it anyway. And I think it just would make it look more dramatic and on this side as well. So just have that a darker shading put in there. Just makes it look more dramatic. And I think she's got tawny colored eyes in the book, so we go ahead and put that brownish color in there, omitting the highlights. And speaking of highlights, I think I have a gel pen here, and just put the white highlight there, white highlight there, highlights there, and a highlight there. And I should move this a little bit lower down. Let me see if I can zoom in just a little bit more. No? Just wanted to fit a little bit closer.
Vaughn says, Hajra, did you say you're going to have a class coming up? Yeah,
I'm going to have 3 online classes coming up because they rescheduled the in-person classes to online classes. So the next 3 weekends, they're $35 a piece, and half that money for each class goes to the Art League. So those are the classes that are going to be online, and they're going to be live streams like this, 3 hours a piece on Saturdays, and that would include you doing the assignment with me giving you a phone or email conversation, explaining how we're going to, assessing your assignment and getting input from me, and also you getting a free private recording edited down of the 3-hour live stream so you can watch it over and over again. And the 3 classes are going to be, one's going to be color theory, that's the one that's next weekend. Then there's going to be a grisaille one the weekend after that, and then there's going to be a 4 ways to draw anything with facial features. Then the features that I've been showing are for that class, the eyes, nose, mouth, and nose and lips. That's for that class. And so that's all going to be part of the live stream. And they just switched it because those classes were all live and people were already signed up to do that in person, but we had to switch them to online because of the whole quarantine and everything. So it's actually a nice way to see if that'll work for the Art League, because they might keep it up after the quarantine if it's something that works for them, you know? Okay, I think that's good, and I think I'm going to do a blue highlight across the top of her eyeball, just like we did with Rhys here, and I think he's got that blue shadow. I'm just going to pick up the teeniest bit.
Gilders Levy said, I saw you were live streaming because my bell icon to your YouTube page alerted me to the event happening live.
Oh, that's nice. I'm glad somebody still has those notifications on. I think a lot of people, either YouTube doesn't notify them or they just turn it off because they assume I don't post that much anymore. Okay, so I put that shadow in. Remember, I put it in at the top of his eye too. And come back in and make that a little bit darker. Might as well go and put it in. I'm putting that dark line in at the top of the eyeballs here. To create that shadow that's coming from the top of the lid onto the cornea there. And I'm also going to sweep that right across, straight across the pupil, because it casts it on the pupil too, that shadow. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't skip the pupil just because the pupil's a different color than the cornea. Okay, so we've got that. And what I want to do now is I'm looking at what else I want to assess here as far as shadows go. And I think I want to do the rim lighting like we were doing on him with his nose and his mouth. We had a little bit of rim lighting there. So we're going to want to do the same thing over here. Let's try to use the clean water. Do as I say and not as I do. Let's try to use the clean water to get some of this rim lighting going. And you've already sort of kept most of the rim lighting, but I just want to heighten some of it. So like right here, I heighten some of the rim lighting across the nose here. And comes down to this part in the shape of the nostril, so you know you don't want to follow it as the shape of the nose. And then I'm going to amend that further by putting, let's see, more of this shadow color. Just need to point that. I'm trying to point this shape right here because you know you've got that shape in the nose there that curls around. I'm referring to that same drawing class again that I'm going to be doing, but see how there's this. You can't really see it in most people because you've got the cartilage is underneath and it's covering up, but there's like this fold that makes that that little W shape right there, and that's what I'm trying to do. Also go in and put that darker shadow in right there. Okay, so that's fine. And after that, I think the only other places I wanted particularly bright rim lighting was, I think we already have it on the chin. We sort of kept it. And then we kept it over here. I can put in a little bit more rim lighting right there. And can sort of swoop down to that part right there. And sort of neaten it off onto this section, because I remember this blend was giving me a little bit of problems. So I can sort of clean up that blend on this cheap paper. But yeah, I definitely would advise to use better paper whenever you can, because that'll always make your rear work easier. Okay, so I think I basically kept all the blends for the rim lighting everywhere else, so don't really see where I want yellow lighting anywhere else. I can just pop some down over here just to unify the fact that she's got some yellow on her nose. Otherwise it doesn't look like she's got this brighter yellow anywhere else, and it sort of stands out as a what's that doing there type of color. Don't ever use a color just in one place, and you want to use it, at least dab in something someplace else so it unifies it. Okay, I think that's good. And I think just over here, we would have wanted a little bit more of a triangle for that Rembrandt lighting type effect on both sides. But we saw what happened when we tried to do it with the gouache over here, because it just wasn't as useful with this type of paint to try to make that effect. So I'll try to do it in a very limited capacity. If I don't like it, then I will go ahead and pick it up and cover it up with white again. And it's not going to be as dark as the stuff above it. It's actually supposed to have more white in it, which is why we ended up mixing white into it in the last time. So just mix a little bit more white into it. And like I was saying, it's kind of the kind of thing where you're like, how on this paper is this really working that well? So if it doesn't work that well, you can just sort of leave it out. Put a little bit of a triangle there. Yeah, see, to me it just feels like it blends right back into the paper with that color, and that paper's not really letting me have that gradient, so I think I'll just let it be. I tried doing it over there and the same thing happened, so I think it's better to say we just sort of leave it. And I think what I'll do is to harmonize that a bit more, I'll just add a bit more of a I'll go further with my blending, and that way it goes further down and blends. There we go. Okay, and I think that face is done, and now we can do the hair and the jewelry. So with the jewelry is going to be quite fun. We can use this bronzy color, so I'm going to try to see. I think I probably should make the hair and the jewelry the same color. I think that would be cool and fun. And so I think that what we can do is try to do the yellow over on, let's see, should I do the jewelry first or the hair first? What do you think?
I think you should do the jewelry first.
Should do the jewelry first?
Yes.
Okay, hold on, let me tilt this up so it isn't as crooked. Let's see, is it flatter now? Can you see if it changed anything?
Sure, seems fine.
Okay, alright.
I'm gonna probably scoot that thing down a little bit.
Okay. Okay, is it good now?
Mm-hmm.
Just want to make sure everything's on screen that can be on screen. Okay, alright.
So you have a lot of comments. First of all, Tony says, are they accepting new enrollments? And I think that you can...
Yeah, they are accepting new enrollments, and you can just email me and I'll give you the details about that for scale if you want that. But yeah, it's a for $35 for 3 hours and a recorded video and input from me. It's a pretty good bargain. If I was doing it privately, I'd charge even less. But like I said, the Santa Cruz Art League keeps half of that money, and they're a non-profit, so they need that money too.
MJ Pete said, good luck with the classes. Do not get frustrated with technology. Just keep going.
Yeah, we will try to.
Vaughn says YouTube has been very iffy to show subscriptions live, even with the bell icon, so glad it didn't for you. And then Heather said, I made sure that I have the bell on. And then Kat said that has you on the big screen TV.
Oh, does she? Does that make it look completely more ridiculous, or is the stream quality better on the... I'm curious to know.
And Elf Lord's Journey says, elves my kinfolk, very nice drawing. Joyce says, we are hungry for these from our favorite YouTubers. I really appreciate this, knowing you sometimes have physical limitations, making this special for me.
Aw,
And
thanks, I
MJ
really
Pete
appreciate
said,
it.
what about using FinTech Gold for the jewelry?
I could use Fanatec Gold for the jewelry. That's not a bad idea, but I'm trying to figure out if I think that, but if I did that, there would be no shading. So if you're okay seeing no shading for the jewelry, then, and just going it on in a single color, like as a gold accent, then absolutely I can do that. I've got all the Fanatec colors, of the metallics anyway, of the, metal colors, not the spectral colors. Okay, looks like she's got red earrings on too, so I've got to make sure I do that as a red earring. But I'm gonna, for her, because her hair is really light, it's a blonde, I'm gonna go ahead and do the base color all the way around first, and then come back and do pick out highlights and then bronzy lowlights, and so that'll make it easier. That's what I'm doing here. But yeah, if you're interested in those 3 classes, I'm probably not going to do them again as a live stream, so that's a one-time opportunity, unless, because like I said, the Art League has never done live streams before. They're doing it now because of the quarantine. So it's a great way to get the, university level information class from me if you have that. And as I was saying to you before, if you're a former patron, you can email me and I can give you a patron discount that I'm sure the Santa Cruz Art League would be okay with. As long as it's on my end, the money that I'm discounting is not discounted from their part of it. Well, I'd be happy to do that for people like Vaughn, Kat, Diane, and other people who are actual patrons. So it's a nice way to say thank you to them. But yeah, so it's just I do hope it works. I am worried about not the technology really. Like YouTube drops it and we can put it back on and everything. I'm worried about the older audience from the Art League, and they might not know how to deal with being there or not being there. So that's the only thing that's stressing me out. I think that's why I wanted to do a few free live streams again.
So MJ Pete and Heather have both said that they want to see Finatec.
Okay, that's cool.
Kat says there's detailed better, but the TV sound is not so great.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I wish YouTube would really step up its game when it comes to the live stream quality. It is a huge website, and there's a lot of people using up bandwidth for it all the time, so... And that way, it's actually not surprising that people lose, that we lose quality and it drops the stream sometimes. But it is frustrating because I feel like it hurts smaller channels. Like I have a medium-sized channel and it hurts my channel more because it frustrates people and you lose people as a result of that. Whereas a bigger channel, I think, can sustain that kind of bad PR a little bit better than, you know, than I could with the dropping of a live stream. But luckily, it does at least go back on. At least it's not like it's shut off and you have to start a new stream. Remember when that used to be the case, where we had to, like, once it stopped, you have to go and restart a brand new stream instead of just reconnect. That was a lot more difficult. So at least you don't have to do that anymore. But yeah, that's the only thing I'm nervous about for the scale class people, is I'm worried about whether or not they can be able to do that. But apart from that, you know, it's fine. Okay, so it looks like I missed a few sections of her hair, and also slight parts where her earring are. So I'm just going to quickly, or a slight part of her skin. So I'm going to go ahead and get that skin real quick with just this part of it, because I see a little bit of skin right here. And I'm also going to get the earrings with this part of it. And there would be shading on these earrings, but we're going to come back and deal with that later, because we've sort of moved on to, we want to do bigger pieces of the painting first, because if it's just the smaller parts, then you guys can't see the details as well anyway. So let's come over to this side. I think this right here is where the other earring is showing through the hair. And then, yeah, I think I'd actually prefer to be doing a Muha piece, frankly, because I don't know, I always feel like the Golden Age Master Studies, to me, I always feel like I learn more than if it's a modern piece, but I definitely like the Art Nouveau vibe of this. Okay, and I will get the gold Finitex out for the jewelry, but let's do the low lights on the hair first, and also the highlights, and then we can pull that out. I always have a separate watering cup, water cup, and also a separate brush for my metallic, so it doesn't turn all of my paints with those little tiny mica particles in them. So that's just a tip that I would give you guys as well, which is that do not mix your paints, you know, with your non-metallics into your metallics, because it's just like glitter, it just never goes away, and it's fine when it's there initially, and then later on you get tired of it real quick. Okay. And when you're painting with gouache, your dirty water will get dirtier faster, so keep that in mind too. Okay, so I'm going to use this brown. And I used it for her eyebrows, and so that's what I'll be using for the low light. So let's start over here. And I'm going to go ahead and...
Vaughn says she's texting for class info. Is that okay?
Texting me?
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine.
And then Tony says, artists are suffering financially right now. Last thing I want is a discount. Sad to be missing PNW's Ballet's Giselle, but not asking for refunds. Yeah,
well, that's really sweet of you. There's a lot of people, you know, that's what the Santa Cruz Art League is suffering with, is that they actually can't afford to, you know, take more of a cut than that, and they also can't afford to completely stop, and so that's why they were trying to do the live streaming, because I think I was the only teacher that I think that they might have that actually has, you know, I think it's just because I'm a millennial, but I think there's probably others on there that maybe are familiar with that, but probably don't know about it as much as a result of not being in a younger age group. But I offered that as something that I was willing to do, because I knew that they would be really hurting for that kind of thing right now. So yeah, that's very sweet of people to recognize that actually sometimes it just takes something like this for an art institution, organization to go under, unfortunately, you know, because they're counting on basically a prosperous time for people to show up and take these classes and stuff. And if something goes really downhill, then it's these non-necessity type things, you know, that go first, which makes sense, but it's also sad because, you know, when things get better, you kind of want them around, and then they've actually tanked and disappeared as a result of a recession of some sort, you know. Okay, so I'm just sort of choosing areas where we would want to have low lights, and it's easier to do than the highlights, which we're going to come back and pick out in a different way. So for example, if I have a low light here and it's fading to a highlight, then I'm going to do the same thing I did with the hair over there and sort of feather into this area and streaky, make sure you have a little bit of a streak line, feathering like that, and again, fight the paper for, in this case, a little bit, and then it goes back to a darker right there, and so you end up having that lovely bronze effect there, but you will lose it. It'll look more like metal or fabric unless you get that streaky edge to it. So, you know, try to keep that kind of streaky edge that I had there and use a less watery paint, because otherwise you will lose the look of it actually being dry hair, like I was saying before. And I'm trying to see where else we want to have she actually, like I said, has a limited amount of shadows on her hair, given that her hair's quite light. So it's sort of up to us where we want to streak in different colors, but you can see how it's more fun in some ways, you know, than having just the highlight, as you can have the low lights too. I think I've finished off my brown color. I'm gonna mix it more over here. Maybe I'll just use it from over here. Let's see, I'll probably add a little bit more blue to that. A little bit more brown, I mean. So let's see, let's add a little bit of this. At the risk of muddying that up on the indigo side that I'm gonna need later. But I can always mix up more of that indigo. But yeah, I'm going to have a lot of fun doing that for whoever does show up, because I was really looking forward to teaching that. I already taught a few classes this year, so luckily I got to have a lot of overpacked classes, in fact, for the few classes that I had already managed to teach before this whole coronavirus thing happened. So I was really happy with the amount of students I was getting, and how good that was going to be for the art league that I was having all these classes.
MJ Pete's leaving, so you should say goodbye to him.
Oh, bye, Michael. Thanks so much for dropping by.
Also, Haley is happy to see you coloring in this this characters from this series.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, it's like I said, it's a fun Audible book to have. I'm gonna go ahead and I guess he didn't get to see the metallics. I'm sad about that he didn't get to see that, because we didn't get to that, and he's one of the people that was asking for it. So sorry about that, Michael. But if I upload it later, I guess you'll be able to see it. But I wanted to finish the hair first, and if you were gonna stick around, maybe I can switch to that first. If he's already gone, then I guess I can't do that for him. But if I knew that he was leaving earlier, then I could have done that first. But yeah, I'll do that in Finitech, because somebody else is asking for it too. And this is a big piece, so I doubt people are going to be around for the entire whole thing, given that probably have other things to do with your life right now. Alright, so I've got that part in, and let's see, I'm trying to figure out this part. I think is a good area to add shadow in. You know, a lot of this just becomes guessing, right? Guessing where you feel like the tendrils would look good in some balance of color for the dark versus light. Okay. So I guess we'll try to wrap this person up, and then we were saying we're going to make it a 3-hour stream, right? So, well, okay, so Elijah said that the time I have left is 20 more minutes, and we'll see. I'll see how I feel in 20 minutes. Maybe I'll make it a little bit longer, but yeah, 20 minutes. Okay, 20 minutes. Gotta stick to a schedule, otherwise I will just be here all night, I guess. I don't mind, but I guess what it means is that I'm not going to be very good at following the class schedule, so I need to really make myself do that every now and again, is actually follow the rules for time. I do that with in-person classes too, where I'm like, oh, this is a 4-hour class or a 5-hour class, and instead I'm there for like 6.5 hours instead, and I'm perfectly happy to do that. But then I think to myself later, for the people who had to leave early, they had to leave early and they didn't get all the next hour of information. So I try to do that more out of fairness now, is just try to stop at the right time, even though it's so hard for me. I'm just bad at that, you know. If there's still people around, I feel like I can, and they still want some questions answered, I'm perfectly happy to keep doing that. That's a weakness of mine. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and try to go faster on this, because I did want to. Felt like, I guess I've been slowing down, because I didn't realize I had only 20 minutes left. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and try to go faster on this part of it, and just at least do the metallics for her hair and everything, so that way we don't get to lose the opportunity to see how those look on here. I think it would be a lot of fun to do that in metallics. Now the question for that is, do you want to do a base metallic color and then just do that fully on in metallic, or if I want to just do the highlights in the metallic? But I think that'll be a question we can answer shortly. Okay, so more lowlights over here. I've got a chickadee in my bird feeder right now. You know, different birds dropping by in the bird feeders all day. They're nice company, actually, because you have to be at home all day, and you've got 2 bird feeders hanging up in your window. You get to see all sorts of birds. Especially if you live in an area like ours, which is like close to a state park. So as a result of that, there's a nice big wildlife area around here, so you get to see, you know, a lot of different animals just showing up around near your house. Everything from quail and wild turkeys to all sorts of other smaller birds that show up the feeder, and lots of birds that you don't actually get to see in suburbs and such. Quite nice. It's really funny also to see these little birds that look so cute, and actually they hate each other. So they're constantly like each other's enemies and fighting each other off and being competitive, and you're like, wow, you guys look really cute, but you actually are fierce little fighters to survive. Okay, so I think I've gotten most, I mean, I'm like speeding through this part now, but I think I've gotten most of the lowlights that I feel like I would have gotten. And what I would have done, had I had a bit more time, was what I would have tried to come back and do the highlights. And so I would pick out more of the highlights in the opposite direction with some white or some light yellow, or just lifting out with the wet paint to get the gouache up. But you can see where this is going with the lowlights, is that it's already added some dimension to the hair. And then when I would have come back, I would have, you know, like I said, added a different type of dimension by adding the lights too. So that it would give me 3 values, right? Like the mid-tone, the dark low light, and then the lighter highlight. And so that allows you to have so much more dimension to the hair than if you had just decided to color it one solid color. And then the other thing you want to be mindful of is, like, just like I did with his hair over here, is that you would probably want to make sure you did those streakiness and those lines, so that when I did the highlights, which is what I would do later, is that you'd end up having a little bit of that hair effect instead of it just being like coloring pieces of fabric. So right now I haven't developed as much of that for this, but I would later on. So, and it's better, how that works better is if you dry brush more of it. See, like I'm dry brushing that right now. So if you go and dry brush it, it sort of works better like that. Okay. I think that's good. I think this part of it right here is part of her hair, but there's like the necklace showing, so that's a little bit confusing. I thought that was definitely not part of the dress, but there's a little bit of the necklace showing there, so I guess it could go either way. I think because it does have the necklace there, I'll go ahead and spot in that. And it looks rather orange, so I think what I'm going to do is lift out that part. Come back in with just the red. There we go. Alright, so now onto the gold. You want to get me that, the FinTech gold from over there? While I'm getting the last of this red in the dress. Nope, not as much water in my brush. Yeah, that'll work. So this is